Chapter 447. I coldly looked at the fat, great heavenly master and smiled. Since you people from Mount Longhu are so patient, I naturally have nowhere to run. May I know your name? The fat, great heavenly master wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He nodded. Fine, I'll let you know. This humble Taoist is Li Longqian, the head of the Eastern Hidden Courtyard of Celestial Master Si Han's mansion. Eastern Hidden Courtyard? It was said that it was the only Tao Academy in the Celestial Master's abode. The dean's identity was extraordinary, and he held an extremely important position in the Celestial Master's abode. It was no wonder that the fat Celestial Master was the superior of the other two Celestial Masters. As for the name Li Longqian, according to the blood drop generation of the 3 mountains of Jingyi School, he was obviously 1 generation older than Qinyangting. I nodded. So, it's Li Longqian, the head of the Eastern Hidden Courtyard. No wonder you're so powerful. However, there's something I don't understand. I've already told you everything about what happened in the royal tomb of the Shang dynasty. Why are you still chasing after me these past few months? This was indeed what puzzled me. There was enmity between me and Mount Longhu, but to them, that woman was more important. Even if they didn't believe me, they should have made preparations in many ways. However, the 3 of them were the ones who chased after me, and the 3 of them were still guarding me. It seemed that they hadn't left this place in the past few months and had placed all their chips on me. When Li Longqian heard what I said, he shook his head and sneered. My Mount Longhu has its reasons. How can a little thief like you interfere? You only need to know that if my Mount Longhu wants you dead, you must die. What a tyrannical Mount Longhu. When I first met Qinyangting, the head of the profound altar palace, I'd already seen how tyrannical Mount Longhu was. Today, Li Longqian had given me a new understanding. Qinyangting had only slandered me for secretly learning the technique, but he wanted to take my life without a reason. The anger in my heart surged, but I couldn't help but feel suspicious. From his words, it seemed that he wanted to kill me here and now. Could it be that Mount Longhu no longer wanted to find that woman? Before I could ask further, Li Longqian said, as for the matter regarding the royal tomb of the Shang dynasty, after you die, we will search your soul. We will find the answer. It is more reliable than your empty words. I suddenly understood. No wonder he wanted to kill me. He wanted to search my soul. No matter what kind of secret technique it was, after the soul search, the soul would definitely be destroyed. What a heavenly master of Longhu Mountain. Not only did he want to take someone's life, he didn't even let go of their soul. I was so angry that I laughed. I mocked. You're so arrogant. If you want me dead, I'll die. Is it possible that the Celestial Master Mansion of Mount Longhu doesn't worship Celestial Master Zhang, but the 10 Yama Kings? I'm afraid that even if Zhang Daoling were to reincarnate, he wouldn't be as arrogant as you. After hearing my words, the 3 heavenly masters of Longhu Mountain seemed to be even angrier than me, especially Li Longqian. His expression changed as he said, Bastard, how dare you say Celestial Master Zhang's name? Originally, I could have left you with an intact corpse, but you dared to disrespect the ancestor Celestial Master. Today, I will pull out your tongue and skin you. I will let you have a taste of the hell of having your tongue pulled out. There was nothing more to say. I took a step forward and was about to attack. After completing the 8th step of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper, I had the ability to fight against the Celestial Master. This time, after absorbing the shaman energy of the Tai Sui giant corpse, my power had skyrocketed. Even if I were to face the old Celestial Master of Longhu Mountain, I wouldn't be afraid. I was confident that I wouldn't be inferior to him. However, at this moment, the evil sacrificial spirit extended his hand and pulled me back. He shook his head and said, I can't support the great power I absorbed for too long. Don't waste time. I'll take care of these 3. After saying that, he walked toward the 3 people from Longhu Mountain. Of course, I didn't have any objections to what he said. Originally, I wanted to test my current power. The best case scenario was that I would be on par with Li Longqian. If I wanted to deal with them, I would have to rely on the evil spirit. The evil sacrificial spirit didn't conceal his words, so Li Longqian obviously heard him. He sneered disdainfully and ignored the evil sacrificial spirit. He looked at me and said, "You're so confident today because you're relying on this flying zombie, right? Haha, you're really naive, kid. Although this kind of zombie, otherworldly item can also become a heavenly master, it's far inferior to an ordinary heavenly master. How can it be a match for me, heavenly master Jingi? Fine, I'll let you witness the supreme techniques of my Dragon Tiger Mountain today." With that, he was too lazy to make a move. With a wave of his Taoist robe, he signaled a skinny, dark-skinned heavenly master standing on his left to fight. The skinny, dark-skinned heavenly master obeyed the order and walked to the front of the evil, sacrificial spirit. Just as he was about to cup his hands and say something, the evil, sacrificial spirit seemed to have lost its patience. It opened its mouth slightly, and its voice was like a clap of thunder. "She." After a mysterious syllable was uttered, the evil, sacrificial spirit raised a finger and drew a horizontal line in front of its chest. In the next second, I was frightened to see blood spurt out of the skinny heavenly master's chest. Then, it was as if an invisible blade had slashed across his chest. The skinny heavenly master was cut into two halves. He didn't even need to use half a move before he died. In just a blink of an eye, Li Longqian's face was filled with shock. His smile disappeared. I stood next to him, but I wasn't surprised at all. I had seen the evil sacrificial spirit's mysterious technique in the imperial tomb of the Shang dynasty. At that time, he had uttered 2 syllables in a row to repel the joint attack of more than 10 heavenly masters. Now, he had used the same technique again. Although he had only uttered 1 syllable, his opponent was just an ordinary heavenly master. It was a normal result. The deathly silent atmosphere lasted for half a minute before Li Longqian retracted his gaze from the remains of the skinny heavenly master and turned to look at the evil, sacrificial spirit. There was no longer any disdain in his eyes. Instead, there was an intense fear. At the same time, the evil sacrificial spirit's gaze shifted to him. It didn't waste any time and used the same technique, uttering the mysterious syllable again. "She." With the skinny heavenly master as an example, Li Longqian didn't dare to be careless. He quickly took out several silver talismans. With a light rub of his fingers, all the talismans were activated. They formed several layers of colorless glass-like barriers in the air in front of him, as expected of the master of the Eastern Hidden Courtyard. His reaction was extremely fast. After he had done all that, the evil sacrificial spirit's finger had just raised and slashed down diagonally in the air. Just like before, another celestial master standing behind Li Longqian suffered an unexpected calamity, as if an invisible giant blade had slashed past him. From the right side of his neck to the left side of his chest, he was sliced into 2 halves and instantly breathed his last. The layers of defensive talismans in front of Li Longqian didn't have any effect. They were shattered almost instantly, and his whole body was cut in half at the waist. Unlike the other 2, after Li Longqian was cut in half at the waist, his organs flowed all over the ground, but he didn't die immediately. He even crawled a few steps on the ground with his hands. His huge eyes stared at the evil, sacrificial spirit, and his mouth moved, but he couldn't make any sound. After a while, his arms went limp and he finally died. The result was not beyond my expectations, but the process was a little different from what I had imagined. I hadn't fought with Li Longqian, but I could vaguely see that even if his cultivation base hadn't reached the Yang God realm, it wasn't far from it. Who would have thought that when facing the evil, sacrificial spirit, he wouldn't be able to fight back? It seemed that my previous guess was right. In the same realm, the evil, sacrificial spirit was an invincible existence. Since he had the cultivation base of a Yang God Celestial Master, no Yang God Celestial Master was his opponent. If even a Yang God Celestial Master wasn't his opponent, I was afraid that in this world, only the old president or the current heavenly master of Mount Longhu would have the ability to fight against him. As I was thinking about this, the evil sacrificial spirit didn't move at all. It was as if he had casually crushed 2 ants. He lifted his feet and walked around the corpses. Then, he urged me to continue our journey. I didn't say anything and followed him. After a long time, We finally walked out of the 1,000-mile-long Tying Mountain Range and arrived at Pingding County, which was located at the western entrance of Tying Mountain. At this place, the evil sacrificial spirit seemed to be unable to suppress the power in his body and hurriedly separated from me. I asked him where he was going to seclusion and how we would meet after he finished his seclusion. However, he shook his head and didn't answer. Let me move around as I please. Once he finishes digesting the power in his body, he will find me. After saying that, he left towards the west and disappeared into the western sky in an instant. Not long after the evil, sacrificial spirit left, Jiang Dongsheng also woke up. Although he was seriously injured, he still had the cultivation base of a heavenly master, so he was able to move around without any problems. He hurriedly asked me about what had happened after he had fainted. I didn't hide anything and told him about the deaths of Su Yingxiu and Li Longqian. Jiang Dongsheng was silent for a long time. Then he turned his head and kowtowed 3 times in the direction of the Corpsine sect. Then he stood up and carried eldest senior brother's body on his back. He picked up the heavenly fan and said goodbye to me. Before he left, he told me to go see grandfather Li when I had time. I didn't know if I should go see the old president, so I didn't give him a formal answer. I just told him that I would try my best to go when I had time. Jiang Dongsheng didn't say anything more. After cupping his hands to thank me, he left. After they all left, I was the only one left. I silently stayed in place and began to think. After this matter, where should I go? I haven't avenged my parents. I haven't resolved the enmity of being hunted down by Mount Longhu, and I haven't been cleared of the crime of killing 18 heavenly masters. However, these things require absolute power. Before meeting the evil, sacrificial spirit again, it's useless to think too much. The safety of the fatty was still uncertain. I had promised to find Yi Pianpian to investigate the situation, but I hadn't done it yet. Also, I didn't know how the reconstruction of the feng shui metaphysics shop in Guangzhou was going. I also didn't know how Wang Kuin's son, little Wang Li, was doing. These were all things I needed to do. However, I was forced to stay in the Corpsine sect for several months. At this time, little Wang Li was already half a year old, and the fatty's crisis had also passed. I still needed to investigate the situation with Yi Pianpian, so the matter with the feng shui metaphysics shop wasn't important. There were so many things in my mind, but they didn't seem to be important at the moment. However, there was only one thing in my mind. Nearly half a year had passed since I left the Corpsine sect. I didn't know how Bayan was doing. Chapter 448. On the way to Shenangjia, I couldn't help but think about the conversation between the evil, sacrificial spirit and the Tai Sui in the Yin Corp sect. What is the power of the origin? What is the mountain and sea realm? I had asked the evil, sacrificial spirit these questions on the way, but the answer he gave me was that it wasn't the right time yet. This feeling made me very uncomfortable. Just like Nan Gong and the old president, it seemed that everyone around me knew what was going on, except for me. With these complicated thoughts, I didn't talk much on the way. Soon, the car arrived in Hubei. I took another car and went to the Shenangjia scenic area alone. After leaving for half a year and arriving here, I put those annoying things to one side, and my heart was full of happiness. It was probably because of the dangerous journey that I had been running for my life. I was eager to find someone close to me to talk to. That person was probably the closest person to me in this world. Over the years, I didn't have many people close to me. Tong Tong was the first. I had always treated her as my younger sister. The spirit snake was half a friend to me. As for the fatty, he was my friend and also my brother who had grown up together with me. Although the mystery from last time still hadn't been solved, I believed from the bottom of my heart that he wouldn't lie to me. Apart from them, there was only Bayan. She was my wife. Although we hadn't seen each other much and hadn't spoken much, she was still the closest person in my heart. Whenever I was happy, she was the one I wanted to share with the most. Whenever I was in trouble, she was the one I wanted to talk to the most. My previous emotional experience was blank, but I knew very well in my heart that this was love. Sometimes, I felt that I wasn't a good husband. Bayan and I didn't spend much time together. Every time we met, we only stayed for 1 or 2 days. Then, because of various things, we had to leave in a hurry. Fortunately, She was considerate and never complained about anything. But because of this, I felt that I had wronged her. Many times, I had the thought that I wanted to stay with her for a long time. I didn't care about the heavenly master, Shaman Chi, or Emperor Ku of the Gao Xian clan. I wanted to throw everything away and stay here with Bayan forever. But every time I thought about this, there was always an obstacle in my heart that I couldn't get rid of. It was the Liu family. I have to avenge my parents' blood feud. Most of the times I left, it was for this reason. But now, the situation seems to be different. In the past, I couldn't see any hope of revenge, so I kept working hard and cultivating until the day I had the strength to overthrow the Liu clan. This time, I already had 1 foot in the Celestial Master realm. I was confident that I could fight anyone in the Liu family. With my eyes and the snake spirit, although I couldn't guarantee that I could wipe out the Liu family, I could at least fight them head-on. Moreover, there was the sacrificial evil spirit. As long as he digested the power, he could crush the entire Liu family with a single finger. Now that I had confidence in my heart, my obsession from before had faded a little. This didn't mean that I didn't want to take revenge, but I was no longer in such a rush. I no longer thought about it day and night. All he had to do was wait for the sacrificial evil spirit to come back and settle everything. At this moment, I wasn't in a rush for revenge, nor was I in a rush for anything else. So, I had to accompany Tao Wu for a few more days. When I reached my destination, it was already dusk. The sky was getting dark. Perhaps it was because I was close to home, but I felt nervous. I stood by the riverside and took a few deep breaths before I calmed down. Just then, a fluorescent light appeared before my eyes. The majestic hall came into view again. Looking at the familiar words, Fire God Temple, on the board, I eagerly stepped onto the red stone steps and stepped into the hall. The red platform, the red seat, everything was the same as before. This time, Yintong didn't appear. I looked around, and there was no one in the hall. I vaguely remembered that the last time I came here, Yintong told me that he was the ancestor of the Shang dynasty, Shang Chi. Then he disappeared. However, Tao Wu told me that she had never felt his presence. Just as I was thinking about this, the voice that I had been waiting for a long time entered my ears. The voice was like the sound of nature, making me feel warm. However, I couldn't help but feel nervous and guilty. Of course, I was mostly happy. Husband, you're here. The one who had spoken was Tao Wu. She was still smiling sweetly and considerate, without a trace of sadness or worry. I turned to look. Tao was still wearing her red wedding dress. She was smiling, and her eyes were filled with surprise. Husband, you'll be back in less than half a year. How was it? Did everything go smoothly outside? I pretended to be calm. At this moment, the heavenly master and the battle of the witchcraft were nothing compared to the smile of my lovely wife. It went smoothly. Everything went smoothly. As I said that, I couldn't help but extend my hand to touch Tao Wu's delicate face. Tao Wu was a little bashful. She lowered her chin slightly, and the light from the fire shone on her face, making her look even more charming. Did you miss your husband? With the light from the fire, I could see the fine hair on Tao Wu's face and ears, adding to her charm. Yes. Tao Wu's chin drooped again. Looking at the fairy-like beauty in front of me, I couldn't help but recall what she'd said when I'd left the Fire God Temple, and she'd taken the initiative to let me lift her veil. Although we've never done the deed of husband and wife, our hearts are connected. Husband, can you lift my veil today? Even now, my heart couldn't help but flutter when I recalled what she'd said. Her bashful look was even more alluring. I couldn't help but want to dote on her. Caressing her cheeks, I couldn't help but say emotionally, Husband missed you too. Then I pressed my lips against hers. Before I'd come, I wanted to say a million things to Tao Wu. However, when I saw Tao Wu, all my words disappeared. Perhaps giving my lover a deep kiss was the best thing to say. Tao Wu probably hadn't expected such an intimate action from me. She lowered her chin even more, and her snow-white neck was tinged with pink. Although we'd been husband and wife for a long time, and I didn't reject the deed of husband and wife, I didn't rush to do anything after the kiss. I just looked at her with a burning gaze. Tao Wu was still as shy as a frightened deer. She slightly avoided my hot gaze. After a while, she raised her head to look at me again. Her gaze carried a bit of heartache. Did husband suffer any grievances outside these past few months? You look much more haggard. Although I didn't directly participate in the battle at the corpse sect, I was also affected. My clothes were inevitably torn, and I looked haggard. I quickly shook my head. No, my time outside has been smooth. Let's not talk about that. This time, I plan to stay here for a long time. We'll stay together in this temple. Hearing my words, Tao Wu was slightly stunned. After a while, she muttered, "Staying together for a long time is naturally good, but what? You don't want to? How could that be possible? Of course I'm willing. Every day, I hope to be with husband for 100 years. Staying in this cave every day, I'm always worried that husband will forget Tao Wu." Tao Wu smiled. There was a hint of melancholy in her voice. My heart slightly ached. This little fool, staying alone in this desolate cave every day. It was really hard on her. Thinking of this, I felt even more tender towards her. I couldn't help but scratch Tao Wu's nose and said, "Fool, you're my wife." Which husband in this world would forget his own wife? In the past few years, I've always been worried about other things, so I neglected you. Now I understand. Although there are other things, it's more important to cherish the people in front of me. You're my wife. I won't let you stay alone in this desolate cave anymore. You can't go out, so I came here to accompany you. Unless it's something necessary, I won't go out. From now on, this will be my home. I wasn't stupid. I could clearly feel that many people had ulterior motives for getting close to me. Only Tao Wu. She wholeheartedly wanted to be good to me. She never thought of asking anything from me. How could I bear to abandon her and go out to pursue those groundless matters? Moreover, after going out for 1,000 miles, although it was a blessing in disguise, my heart was still extremely tired. At this moment, I said these words. On one hand, I felt very guilty towards the woman who was closest to me. On the other hand, I was tired of the mutual deception outside. Rather than racking my brains to survive outside, it was better to return here and live in seclusion. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was only natural for a woman to rely on their husband. However, Tao Wu was overwhelmed by the favor. Her eyes were even slightly misty. Currently, my realm was already close to that of a heavenly master. Adding on the fact that I had cultivated the 8th step of clear insight, my eyesight had become even more powerful. Furthermore, Swan Ni's cultivation seemed to have increased as well. In my eyes, he seemed to be even more solid and real. Previously, I might have had a knot in my heart and always felt that Tao Wu was a ghost bride. However, now that I had experienced so many things, I knew that she was the most important to me. Regardless of whether she was a human or a ghost, it wouldn't change that. Tao was obviously moved. After a brief silence, she grabbed my hand and clasped her fingers tightly. She said, with husband's words, "Tao Wu will have no regrets even if I die." I smiled and pulled Tao Wu into my embrace. Smelling the faint fragrance on her body, I pretended to be angry. "Fool, why are you talking about life and death? We still have a long time in the future." Tao Wu smiled faintly and allowed me to hold her in my embrace. However, she avoided the previous topic and asked, "I can see that husband's cultivation seems to be about to break through to Celestial Master." Celestial Master? I smiled wryly in my heart. Wouldn't I become the dowry of that old witch in Miaojiang? I only reported the good news and didn't report the bad news. It's just a short distance away. The Qilin Gu was one of the 2 ancestral Gu in Miaojiang. It had the power of the Julie god. I believed that Tao Wu, who was only at the Yin god realm, wouldn't be able to break the Qilin Gu. Moreover, the sacrificial evil spirit would find a way sooner or later. There was no need for me to say it now and make her worry for no reason. Tao Wu smiled and buried her head in my chest. She seemed to be deep in thought. I thought she had noticed something and was about to explain. However, Tao Wu suddenly said with a voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz, "Husband, it's still late. Why don't we go to bed early?" I lowered my head and saw that Tao Wu, who had a shy face, now had a pink tint to her ears. I had slept on the same bed with Tao Wu before. However, it was obvious that she didn't just mean it on the surface when she said to go to bed. Even though I was a beginner, I still understood what was going on. Husband and wife intercourse was part of the human relationship. I was already prepared for it, so I didn't say anything. I bent down and picked her up, returning to her cave residence. Tao Wu's body wasn't any different from an ordinary person's. The next morning, Tao Wu and I both woke up. Currently, my cultivation was close to that of a celestial master. On the path of cultivation, not only did I improve my strength, but I also became more tenacious. There was still a long time in the future. I naturally wouldn't be greedy for a moment of pleasure. After getting up, Tao Wu and I were more indifferent than yesterday. There seemed to be endless words of love between us. We sat there and talked about our experiences after we parted. Unknowingly, another day had passed. Beautiful time always seems so short. With Tao Wu by my side, staying here for a lifetime would only be a flash. I hugged Tao Wu quietly. I didn't want to let go for even a moment. Chapter 449. Lao AI. I couldn't react in time, so I called out in a daze. When he realized what had happened, he panicked and tried to hug her with all his might. However, he realized that his hands had directly passed through her body. Lao AI had turned into an illusion. Lao AI. Lao AI. This time, my voice was heart-wrenching. I didn't know what had happened, and I didn't dare to believe what was happening in front of me. At that moment, Lao AI's body had turned illusory. Her face was sad, and she reached out her hands like she wanted to grab me. But her body seemed to be pulled from behind, and she couldn't help but retreat. I sat up like I was electrocuted and chased after her with all my might. I wanted to grab her, but she kept retreating and was always just a little faster than me. Lao AI, don't go. I was just one step away from Sky Master. Although I couldn't fly, my speed was still shocking. Even so, I couldn't catch up to her. Lao AI's face was filled with sadness, and her expression was even more pain than mine. She opened her mouth, and it was obvious that she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Even her illusory body was fading. What was going on? I definitely wasn't dreaming. My cheeks were hurting because I was moving so fast. However, I couldn't do anything about it. I could only watch as my wife's silhouette moved further and further away, becoming blurry and indistinct. I couldn't help but roar in rage. All the meridians in my body were activated, and the Shaman Chi Source Stone and Tao Energy Source Stone in my body provided me with energy. I was a dual cultivator, and my strength was no weaker than some Sky Masters. However, it was useless. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't catch up to her. I grabbed the jade bracelet and crazily absorbed the power of the true dragon vein and the shaman energy that I had gotten from swallowing the Tai Sui. However, I could never catch up to Lao AI. I could only see the bone-deep helplessness on Lao AI's face. My mind was blank, but I gritted my teeth and used all the power in my body. I had to save Lao AI. I had to save my wife. If a man couldn't even protect the woman he loved, what else could he do? I definitely didn't believe that Lao AI would leave me. The sadness on her face was even thicker than mine. Someone had definitely taken her hostage. No matter who it is, as long as they hurt Lao AI, I will never let them off. Silently activating the power in my body, I clenched my teeth and took the 8th step of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper. Apart from being used in battle, the Astral Steps was also useful in chasing an enemy. The moment I used the Astral Steps, my body's functions would be amplified several times. I gathered all of my cultivation under my feet and fiercely stomped on the ground. In a split second, my body shot forward like lightning. At this moment, the Tao Chi and Shaman Chi in my body had both reached glorious knowledge, great completion, and I was just a thin layer away from Heaven Master. Along with the support of 9-star Heavenly Dipper, when I stepped out, my body was like lightning, and my speed increased by more than a level. Not to mention a normal Heaven Master, even a young God Heaven Master, could only do so. But even so, Tao Wu was still slightly faster than me. I rushed out of the cave in vain. In front of me was still that sorrowful face and the figure that was fading away. The 8th step of 9-star Heavenly Dipper was called Bright Insight. After mastering it, Not only would one's power increase, it would also allow one to see through everything. One's eyesight would also improve greatly, and even a sesame seed that was 100 meters away wouldn't be able to escape my vision. But even so, Tao Wu's figure was still fading, so faint that I couldn't recognize it. I trembled as I took a deep breath and furiously activated the energy in my body. The 7 Tao Chi Source stones and Shaman Chi Source stone continuously released energy, and the dragon power of the true dragon vein in the jade bracelet was also transferred. I took another step, and my body exploded once more. The more powerful the technique, the more energy it consumed. Continuously using the astral steps had already exhausted my Tao Chi and Shaman Chi, but the final result was still the same. It seemed that Tao Wu and I didn't move, and she still maintained the same distance from me. If I carefully measured this short distance, it was probably less than 10 feet, but this distance was like a moat. I was completely panicking. I couldn't lose Tao Wu. Panting heavily, I gathered my energy again, clenched my teeth, and stared at Tao Wu's painful and blurry expression. I tried my best to activate all the shaman and Tao Chi in my body. I forced myself to take the 9th step. I had already memorized the incantation of the 9-star astral dipper, but because my realm wasn't high enough, I could only touch the doorstep of the 9th step. I didn't dare to take it because if I forced myself to take it, I would only hurt myself, and the loss would outweigh the gain. But at this moment, I didn't care so much, and I didn't care if he would hurt himself or if the loss would outweigh the gain. I only knew that I needed to be faster, and I needed to take this step to catch up to my Tao Wu. According to the death scripture, the power of the 9th step of the astral dipper was equivalent to the total power of the previous 8 steps of the astral dipper. The 8th step, profound insight, already had the power of a heavenly master, so the power of the 9th step could be imagined. Even if I had to face it head-on, I was confident that I could easily deal with those ordinary heavenly masters. After taking this step, my speed reached a terrifying level. With a heavy stomp, even the hard ground of the fire god temple was cracked. After my body shot out, the friction between my feet and the air seemed to be rubbing against each other, and golden light shone in all directions. The golden light was like a pillar of light that spread in all directions and even illuminated the deep and quiet fire god temple. My speed almost broke through the sound barrier, and it was comparable to flying on a sword. But Tao Wu was still less than 10 feet in front of me, and the distance didn't change. I could still see 2 lines of tears and an even more blurry figure. The huge consumption caused beads of sweat to drip down my forehead. Tao Wu looked as if her heart ached, and she desperately wanted to say something, but no matter how she opened her mouth, no sound came out. Perhaps emotions could make people explode, but they couldn't really give people power. Under the continuous consumption, even though I was unwilling, even though I was on the verge of going crazy, in the end, as my strength was exhausted, my speed gradually slowed down. I thought that when I was fast, Tao Wu would be faster, and when I was slow, she would naturally be slower. I didn't expect that Tao Wu's figure didn't slow down, but became even faster. Tao Wu's figure floated towards the main hall and became more and more illusory until it finally disappeared into the endless darkness. Tao Wu. I let out another mournful scream. Vaguely, I seemed to hear Lao AI saying, "Take care of yourself, husband." I panted heavily and didn't care about the exhaustion on my body. I crazily searched the main hall, but I couldn't even feel a trace of Tao Wu's aura. Where did she go? I didn't give up and looked around again, but I still couldn't find anything. Endless fear surged in my heart. What people were most afraid of wasn't strong power or cruel killing, but the unknown. Even now, I was still a loss. Why did Tao Wu disappear? What kind of power was controlling everything? After searching every corner of the main hall, I slumped on the ground. Thinking back to the situation just now, I felt more and more helpless. Even if I were to face the sacrificial evil spirit, I would only feel that he was very powerful and wouldn't feel as helpless as when Tao Wu was always 1 zhang away from me. It was as if it was the will of heaven and earth that didn't allow me to resist. Father. Suddenly, a dignified voice sounded from behind me. I didn't know when, but the silver-eyed person had suddenly appeared behind me. A bit of hope surged in my heart, and I hurriedly got up from the ground. I asked him anxiously, "Where's Tao Wu? Did you see my wife?" The silver-eyed person bowed. "Father, there's no need to look for her. It's easy to see her. You just have to come back to Fire God Temple half a year later." Half a year? I suddenly let out a breath of relief. Not because it wasn't a long time, but because the silver-eyed person's words proved that he knew what had happened. However, anger surged in my heart. I just had the thought of staying with Tao Wu for a long time. So why did someone have to play tricks on me? I clenched my teeth and continued to ask coldly, "Who took my wife?" "It's not a person." The silver-eyed person's attitude became even more respectful. He bowed and said, "Father, the one who took her was heaven, heaven's will." Heaven's will? I was stunned and couldn't react in time. The silver-eyed person continued, "Father is currently dual cultivating in witchcraft, and you're only one step away from becoming a heaven master. Heaven's will has restrictions. Witchcraft aura heaven master requires the power of Tai Sui, which is the same source and body. On the other hand, Taoist aura requires the power of the stars and draws the power of the stars to the source. Now that Father is already a heaven master, and your witchcraft aura has broken through the sky barrier, it's already going against heaven's will. How can heaven allow you to get together with the Yin God?" I seem to have heard Nangong mention that witchcraft aura heaven master needed to establish a connection with Tai Sui. Nangong had done it back then, and it was exactly the same as what the silver-eyed person said. However, there weren't any living Tai Sui in the current world, so how could my witchcraft aura reach the heaven master level? After absorbing the enormous witchcraft aura from corpse sex Tai Sui, my realm could have broken through to the heaven master level. I could even faintly see my body breaking through the barrier, but there was no movement. I was originally worried that I would turn into the Kirin Gu after breaking through to the heaven master level, but from what the silver-eyed person said, it seemed to be going against heaven's will. Could it be that I had no hope of breaking through in this lifetime? But if that was the case, the sacrificial evil spirit still said that I had to break through the barrier by myself. The heavens didn't want me to reach the heaven master level, so it set up layers and layers of barriers for me. Now, it wanted to take Tao Wu away from me. I couldn't help but feel sad. If that's the case, then tell me, what is this heaven's will? What does it want? I clenched my teeth and said fiercely. My heart was firm to the extreme. No one could separate me and Tao Wu. I thought of when I was still a child. She would quietly watch me from my bedside and help me rub my legs. I thought of how she would quietly wait for me in the tomb of the living dead every day. I thought of all the things that had happened between us. Was it possible that I would have to say goodbye to her forever, just because of this damned heaven's will? Father, don't be too agitated. It's not like you can't meet that woman. Oh, what method do you have? Tell me quickly. The method is simple. From now on, you and that woman can meet once every half a year for 1 day each time. This is the rule of the heaven's will. Originally, breaking through the barrier is already going against the heaven's will. However, everything in the world has a natural counter. Even if the heaven's will is the judge, it won't be so heartless. From this, you will still have a chance to meet that Yin spirit woman, unless what? Unless you can ascend to become an immortal, then you can change the heaven's will. Ascend to become an immortal. Change the heaven's will. Both the Taoist and Xian sects had the saying of ascending to become an immortal. I naturally understood what it meant. What shocked me was the phrase, change the heaven's will. I vaguely recalled the change the heaven that the evil spirit in Tai Sui had mentioned. Could it be that they were talking about changing the heaven's will? But what was the heaven's will? I had always thought that the heaven's will was just a concept, a rule of heaven and earth. However, from the words of the silver-eyed man, even from the evil spirit and Tai Sui, the heavens will seem to be a person. I was silent for a while before I asked the silver-eyed man, "What is the heavens will? Is a person?" The silver-eyed man became silent too. After a while, he grinned. The heaven's will is the heaven's will. It's not wrong to call a person. However, a person who can control the will of heaven and earth can't be called a person. Perhaps the word God is more suitable to describe him. God. I was shocked again. Even with my current cultivation as a celestial master, in the eyes of a normal person, I could already be called a god. I even knew how strong cultivators with higher realms were. However, in the eyes of a normal person, those powerful and magical techniques might be the methods of a celestial. However, in the eyes of a cultivator, it was just a stronger power. Why did the silver-eyed man use the word God? Was there really a God in this world? If there was it a cultivator with extremely high cultivation, or was it another existence that had surpassed human life? I didn't understand, so I opened my mouth to ask again. The silver-eyed man seemed to know what I was thinking. Without waiting for me to speak, he shook his head and said, "Father, the gods are indescribable. Even I don't know what the heaven's will is. You only need to know that the existence that stands at the top of the world is the heaven's will. He overlooks all living beings and sets all rules. If people want to break free from the rules, they must first see him. The prerequisite for seeing him is to surpass human life and ascend to the heavens. Ascend to become a celestial?" I laughed bitterly in my heart. Breaking through to become a celestial master was close at hand, yet far beyond my reach. How could it be easy to ascend to become a celestial? It wasn't just me. Wasn't the ultimate goal of all cultivators in the human world to ascend to the heavens? However, from ancient times until now, other than the unofficial history that was passed down through rumors, how many people had actually ascended to the heavens? Moreover, this was only the prerequisite for seeing the heaven's will. I clenched my teeth. Is there no other way? There isn't. Everything in the world has its own rules. This is the heaven's will, the silver-eyed man said slowly. Originally, I had wanted to stay with Tao Wu for a long time. However, halfway through, the heavens will appeared. I looked up helplessly. There was naturally no sky in the hall, only a dome. I didn't know if the vast sky that I usually looked up at was the same concept as the so-called heaven's will. I could only see that the mural on the dome seemed to be mocking me. A man couldn't even protect his own woman. He could only watch helplessly as she was taken away helplessly, yet he couldn't do anything about it. Back then, when I saw my parents die in front of me, I was filled with despair and self-blame. I felt that I was the most useless, good-for-nothing. Only now, when I saw the light of revenge, did I break free from the deep self-blame. However, I didn't expect that this would happen immediately. Back then, I was only facing the Liu family. I wanted to take revenge, and I knew that I had a target. But now, what was in front of me was an empty heavens will. The current me was even more lost than before. However, at the same time, I was even more determined than before. Just like what the silver-eyed man had said, what was in front of me was the heaven's will. I could only change the heaven's will. Even though I didn't know what the heaven's will was, it didn't affect my determination. One day, I would change the heaven's will, not for anything else, but to be able to stay with my wife for a long time. As for what to do, I would naturally get an answer when the evil spirit comes back from the sacrificial ceremony. As I walked out of the fire god temple, I turned back to look and muttered in my heart, "Tao Wu, see you in half a year." Then, I raised my head to look at the sky that was filled with stars. Chapter 450. The flame god temple behind me slowly became illusory, turning into an illusory shadow until it completely disappeared. I looked at the scene in front of me in a daze, unable to speak for a long time. As I sat there dejectedly, I felt a stabbing pain in my heart. It was as if a knife was twisting and turning in my heart. The person I loved was forcibly taken away from me by someone else, and I couldn't do anything about it. This feeling was really unbearable. As I recalled all the good things about Bayan, the heartache became even more intense. It was simply unbearable. There were some things that one would only know how to cherish after losing them. Previously, when we were together, I would always enjoy the joy that Bayan brought me. Slowly, I felt that it was only natural. However, when everything was taken away by someone else, you would know how selfish you were. Bayan had always been helping me silently. I didn't even have the time to do anything for her. Even if it was an insignificant matter, the heavens had taken her away from me. Sadness, guilt, self-blame. All the emotions flashed through my mind like a movie, making me feel even more uncomfortable. I sat there powerlessly as I stared at the spot where the fire god temple had originally appeared in a daze. Suddenly, a screen of light appeared on the originally empty ground. The majestic hall appeared in front of me once again. My heart tightened. Could it be that there was a change in the situation? Could it be that the heavens had suddenly changed their mind due to some pressure? This thought was a little absurd, but I couldn't help but think in the best possible way. I took quick steps and entered the flame god temple again. Father, don't be overly sad. That woman was willing to sacrifice 1,000 years of her lifespan. Naturally, she didn't want to see Father like this. I searched the hall for a long time, but I couldn't find Bayan. I could only hear the voice of the silver-eyed person. That voice was like a huge bell, rousing one's spirit. The dejection that I felt earlier seemed to have floated away along with the loud voice. My spirit was lifted once again. I calmed myself down. What did the silver-eyed person mean? Why did he say that Bayan had to sacrifice 1,000 years of her lifespan? I couldn't help but ask, why did Bayan have to sacrifice her lifespan? The cultivation path of ghosts was similar to that of humans, but they both had lifespan. The people from the Taoist Association had used the Jade Blood Talisman Tao technique many times to increase their attacks and defenses. The price they had to pay was 10 years of lifespan. Of course, it didn't mean that using this Tao technique would reduce your lifespan by 10 years, but it meant that your cultivation base would be delayed by 10 years. For example, you could become a young god celestial master at 60, but after using this Tao technique, you could only wait until you were 70 to become a young god celestial master. Think about it. Those who could become celestial masters were mostly old people. How many years could they have? Moreover, humans were intelligent beings born from 3 souls, and if ghosts sacrificed their lifespan, it would be even more harmful to their cultivation, and cultivation would be even more difficult. If you were of UU, you would have think, and UU Celesti UU, and UU, and UU. If she sacrificed another 1,000 years of her lifespan, wouldn't that mean that she would never be able to advance her cultivation base? Back in the imperial tomb of the Shang dynasty, the Taoists of Mount Longhu and the Taoist Association didn't hesitate to risk their lives to obtain the key to the immortal gate. From this, one could see how important lifespan was to cultivators. And Bai, in order to see me, had risked her entire life's worth of cultivation. Thinking about this, I felt a trace of warmth in my heart. However, it was soon replaced by endless remorse and self-blame. Humans are greedy. I was proud that I had a woman who was willing to sacrifice everything for me, but I couldn't help but blame myself for my incompetence. How could I, a cultivator who hadn't even become a celestial master, resist the heavenly Tao? Imperial Father, that woman was willing to sacrifice her entire lifetime of cultivation just to be able to see Imperial Father. How can Imperial Father give up on yourself? The silver-eyed man slowly tried to explain. Father's dual cultivation of witchcraft has already gone against the heavenly Tao. Moreover, the heavenly Tao has its rules. A celestial master in the human world can't get along with the Een God in the netherworld. That woman went to the heavenly Tao to reason with it. She swore on her Taoist heart and was willing to sacrifice her entire life's worth of cultivation in exchange for being able to see you, Father. If you were to be in such dire straits, I'm afraid that woman would be heartbroken if she knew. Father, you should pull yourself together. You are the most honorable person in the world. How could you give up on yourself because of such a small setback? The silver-eyed man wasn't trying to persuade me anymore, but rather, it was more like a warning. His words were like sharp needles stabbing into my chest. My body shuddered. I had never thought that there would be such an inside story. Imagine a weak woman like Bai going to reason with the heavenly Tao alone for her husband. She sacrificed her entire life's worth of cultivation in exchange for being able to see her husband once every 6 months. How much courage did she have? If I could do that, how could I, a man of 7 feet, be at a disadvantage? You're right. I have to pull myself together. I stood up again, sweeping away the dispiritedness I had earlier. In order to be able to meet her, Bayan was willing to give up her 1,000 years of cultivation. What reason did I have to be disheartened? Where there's a will, there's a way out. Even if I knew that it was a dead end, shouldn't a man give it a try for the woman he loved? I clenched my fists tightly. I'll come back in half a year. I won't let Tao Wu down. One day, I'll make the fire god temple change. No one can stop me from being with Bayan. Even if it's the heavens, it won't do. The silver-eyed man smiled knowingly before he bowed and retreated. Very quickly, the blinding fluorescent light gradually disappeared. The fire god temple in front of me disappeared again, leaving behind only the wilderness of Shenanjia. This time, I didn't look back and left with determination. For Bayan, I couldn't stop cultivating. One day, I'll be able to go against the heavenly Tao and make this world change. After straightening out these things, my heart felt much better. Then, I walked out of the scenic area. I had been here many times and was already familiar with the way. After walking for about an hour, I left the Shenanjia scenic area. After my cultivation had advanced, my body had become tougher than before. My speed was also much faster. Previously, it would have taken me 3 hours to walk, but now, it only took me 1 hour to complete the journey. When I left the scenic area, it was already evening. It was difficult to get a taxi, so I simply stayed in the hotel next to the scenic area for the night. After a comfortable hot bath, I crawled into bed and lay on the bed, thinking about what to do next. I couldn't do anything about avenging my parents for the time being. After all, the deaths of the 18 heavenly masters were all on my head. If I appeared in the capital at this time, I would become the target of public criticism. At that time, even if I summoned my eyes and the snake spirit, it would be difficult to escape unscathed. It wasn't a big deal for me whether the feng shui metaphysics shop would be rebuilt or not. However, Wang Li should be in the shop right now. Zhang Canwen and I had agreed to meet in 2 years. Now that I thought about it, it had been a year. If we didn't solve this problem soon, it would be too late. Moreover, Zhang Canwen was a member of the Metaphysics Society, so I could ask him to help me inquire about Yi Piampian. After seeing the so-called human-shaped key in the royal tomb of the Shang dynasty, I had a lot of things I wanted to tell Yi Piampian. I could ask Zhang Canwen to help me inquire about them. At the same time, I could also treat Wang Li's illness. Thinking about this, I made up my mind and fell asleep in a daze. It was a quiet night. The next morning, I got up early and took a bus to the train station to buy a train ticket from Shenanjia to Shenzhen. In fact, it would be faster if I took a plane. However, I wasn't like before. The older I was, the more timid I became. Now, I had an instinctive resistance to taking a plane. When I came to Shenanjia with the vice president of the Metaphysics Society, Yang Shilong, he said that if a person embarked on the path of cultivation, the plane was not fated with him. I didn't expect that his words would come true. A Jia master's energy came from the earth. When they took a plane to the sky, they would lose their energy source, so they would feel uneasy. However, if they could become a heavenly master in one step, their body would become incomparably tough and their speed would not be inferior to that of a plane. Naturally, they wouldn't need to take a plane. Cultivation was like this. Some things had to be slowly comprehended. Back then, when Yang Shilong said those words, he didn't know what it meant. But now that he had experienced so much, he understood many of those principles. It could be said that one was never too old to learn. The train wasn't fast, and there were always stops along the way. After dozens of hours, I finally arrived at Shenzhen. Because I called Wang Kuan earlier, when I got off the train, Wang Kuan was already waiting in the waiting hall. After taking my luggage, Wang Kuan smiled. "The train is really punctual now. I just arrived, and I already saw you coming out." Looking at the dozens of cigarette butts at his feet, I didn't want to expose him, so I just smiled. "That's a coincidence. How is little Wang Li now? Is his family okay?" "Good. Wang Kuan probably saw my gaze and scratched his head in embarrassment. His family is fine. Master Zhang said that little Wang Li has already passed his bottleneck. As for the next time, it will depend on his luck. I don't know the specific Dao, so I'm not sure. Anyway, it looks good. Wang Kuan said with a smile. After opening the door and inviting me in, he didn't wait for me to ask and continued. The feng shui metaphysics shop has been rebuilt a long time ago. In the beginning, the police would come over every few days to take statements, but these were all routine matters. My family and Master Zhang are now living in the feng shui metaphysics shop. However, when I came, my uncle said that Mr. Zhou must be tired from the journey, so he wants to welcome Mr. Zhou to the best hotel in Shenzhen. Originally, I didn't want to go, but I was eager to see little Wang Li's situation. However, since Wang Yongjun invited me, I couldn't reject him, so I just nodded, okay. Wang Kuan had been with Wang Yongjun for a long time, so he had developed a clever mind. He seemed to have seen through my thoughts, so he added, Master Zhang, Lu Chuanda, Xie Chenghua, and my youngest son will all go. After eating, we can go back to the shop together. I smiled in understanding. Wang Yongjun was worthy of his reputation as an experienced man. He could take care of everything. The two of us quickly arrived at the hotel that Wang Kuan mentioned. Wang Yongjun, Zhang Kanwan, and Xie Chenghua were already there to welcome me. After shaking hands and greeting each of them, I took little Wang Li from Mrs. Wang Kuan's arms and studied him carefully. Chapter 451. Previously, Zhang Kanwan accepted little Wang Li as his disciple and taught him the cultivation method of Mount Wen. Originally, I thought that after Wang Li passed the half-year barrier, he would be at peace for a while, but it seems that things are worse than I imagined. I lifted little Wang Li's shirt, and the black pit on his chest became more obvious. If the pit was as deep as the sacrificial well in the orchard when I first saw it, then the pit now looked like a sinkhole. At this time, Wang Li was only 1 year old. His body was naturally not very thick, but even so, the pit still looked like an endless deep well. Not to mention cultivators who had opened the yin-yang eye. Even ordinary people could see that something was wrong. I glanced to the side. Wang Kuan was dispirited, and he didn't have the smile from before. He had been reporting the good news and not the bad news on the way here. Only then did I notice that Zhang Kanwan's arm was bandaged. I was anxious to see little Wang Li's situation, so I didn't notice it. When Zhang Kanwan had come out of the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum, he had indeed been severely injured. However, it had been so long, and Zhang Kanwan was at the 5-star knowledge realm, so his body was naturally better than ordinary people. It didn't make sense that he hadn't recovered after so long. Could it be that he had been injured by someone again? My expression darkened. Zhang Kanwan was my best friend, and he was the successor of Mount Wen. If anyone dared to find trouble with Zhang Kanwan, I didn't mind letting them suffer. Brother Zhang, you're wound. I asked with a hint of anger in my voice. Zhang Kanwan still had his unshaven appearance, and he waved his hand nonchalantly. It's okay. It's just a superficial wound. It's not a big deal. Zhang Kanwan didn't seem to want to say it, but Lu Chuanda looked annoyed. Boss, the person who injured Zhang Kanwan wasn't someone else, but little Wang Li in your arms. My heart quivered, and Wang Kuan and the others furrowed their brows even deeper. This was indeed my son's doing. It's the father's fault for not teaching him well. Sigh. Wang Kuan looked like he was about to cry, and he looked apologetic and terrified. Even the faces of the people around him were filled with fear. Only Zhang Kanwan's expression didn't change, and he smiled leisurely. Ha! This small injury isn't a problem. I already said that this little fellow has a good physique, good cultivation material. Look, he's still so young, and he's able to beat me, his master. He's worth teaching. He's worth teaching, huh? While purposely smiling, Zhang Kanwan gave me a look. He was clearly telling me not to continue asking. I nodded and didn't say anything else. However, I was extremely shocked in my heart. Wang Li, who was only 1 year old, was actually able to injure Zhang Kanwan, who had the cultivation of glorious knowledge 5-star. Not only me, but the expression of Wang Kuan and Wang Kuan's group. Moreover, Zhang Kanwen was unwilling to mention this matter in front of everyone. Clearly, the situation was very serious. Zhang Kanwen Wang Kanwen to Wang Li and brother Liwen. Wang Li said, "Along to Wang." Zhang Kanwen quickly changed the topic and said to me with a smile, "Don't just talk. Let's go. The meal has already been prepared. You must have experienced many things during this long journey. Tell your big brother about them." As he said that, Zhang Kanwen pulled me to take a seat. Wang Yongjun and the others were used to being arrogant at the dining table, so they naturally knew how to lighten the atmosphere. After a few jokes, everyone finally showed a rare smile and sat down to eat. I had an ulterior motive, so I just casually talked during the meal. The meal was tasteless. Wang Yongjun obviously noticed something was wrong, so he quickly ended the feast and arranged for Wang Kuan to send us back. The feng shui metaphysics shop was decorated more luxuriously than before. The original four-story building had a few more floors. It didn't reach the clouds, but looked quite grand. I couldn't help but admire Wang Yongjun's methods. Previously, the building had collapsed in the downtown area of Shenzhen. I didn't expect that in just a few months, another building had risen from the ground. Zhang Kinwen still looked as calm as before. He got off the car and walked into the shop, as though nothing had happened. I couldn't sit still. I didn't have time to observe the situation in the shop. I grabbed his arm and asked, "Brother Zhang, what happened? Did Wang Li really hurt you?" Zhang Kanwen gave me a look and turned to take the child from Wang Kuan's wife. He pretended to be indifferent. "Let's go upstairs." I turned to look at Lu Chuanda and Xie Chenghua. The two of them should have seen the scene before. They obviously had some lingering fear. Wang Li and his wife also looked upset as they sighed. I followed Zhang Kanwen to his room with many doubts. "Zhou Yi, I have to congratulate you first. You have reached the glorious consciousness great perfection realm. Looking at your aura, I'm afraid you are only one step away from breaking through to Heavenly Master, right?" After entering the room, Zhang Kanwen still had a faint smile on his face. He wasn't in a hurry to talk about Wang Li's injury. Instead, he asked about my cultivation. Logically speaking, Zhang Kanwen was only at the 5 stars of knowledge realm, and it would be hard for him to see through the realms of those who were much higher than him. However, it was probably because he had the one Shan lineage's cultivation technique that he was able to see through my cultivation. Zhang Kanwen was a person who could handle heavy things easily. The more he was like this, the more uneasy I felt. Thus, I just casually replied, "I was lucky and had some fortuitous encounters." It could be considered bargain. "Tell me about little Wang Li first." Zhang Kanwen then found a stool to sit down. He looked at Wang Li with a sorrowful expression. The calmness in his eyes gradually turned solemn. At this time, little Wang Li had more or less learned to speak a few words. He was obviously very familiar with Zhang Kanwen and was grinning foolishly at him. "What a good child," Zhang Kanwen let out a long sigh. His series of actions made me confused. Even with my temperament, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Brother Zhang, what's wrong? Did you encounter some trouble? Tell me, so we can solve it together." The more he acted like this, the more uncertain I felt. Zhang Kanwen laughed bitterly. "Do you still remember the 2-year promise I made with you?" My heart skipped a beat. At that time, Zhang Kanwen concluded that Wang Li had been possessed by Sister Tong Zihua. He had insisted on killing this child. In order to protect him, I gave in and proposed a 2-year agreement. Everyone who cultivated knew how powerful Sister Tong Zihua was. The seemingly deep pit in Wang Li's chest was actually the passage through which the evil creature communicated with the human world. One day, the terrifying existence behind the pit would escape from the passage and bring disaster to the human world. Moreover, most of the evil creatures that possessed Sister Tong Zihua had extraordinary cultivation. If we couldn't get rid of this evil creature by then, we would have no choice but to kill Wang Li. However, we had already calculated a countermeasure at that time. We had successfully passed the first half-year hurdle, and the second hurdle would only come when he was at least 2 years old. What had happened? Little Wang Li had a few small teeth in his pink gums. He smiled brightly and looked harmless, as if he was no different from other children. However, Such a powerless baby had injured Jean Canwin, a 5-star knowledge star? I said with a solemn expression. Of course, I remember the 2-year agreement you mentioned. But hasn't it only been a year? Jean Canwin hugged little Wang Li and kept teasing him, but there wasn't a trace of a smile on his face. At that time, I did predict that the second hurdle would come when he was 2 years old. I also had a certain degree of confidence that I could help him pass that hurdle and deal with the evil creature hiding behind the pit. But now, I'm afraid that with our cultivation, we won't be able to deal with that evil creature after a year. My heart sank. Jean Canwin and I had known each other for a long time, so he knew my trump card. Tong, the snake spirit, the corpse demon, and Xiao Jin were all extraordinary creatures with high cultivation. Jean Canwin had seen all of them before, and he also knew that I was at the peak of Knowledge Star and was only one step away from becoming a celestial master. In addition to Jean Canwin, who had Wen Shan's cultivation technique, even Yang God's celestial master wouldn't be able to take advantage of us. But now he was so dispirited. What kind of terrifying existence was the monster that had possessed little Wang Li? Little Wang Li was still smiling harmlessly in Jean Canwin's arms. His eyes were filled with a child's curiosity towards this strange world and familiarity with Jean Canwin. I couldn't imagine that such a powerful evil creature was hiding in this small body. Let's not talk about whether or not we could deal with that evil creature. Once that evil creature broke out of the hole, little Wang Li would immediately turn into ashes. Back then, I had insisted on protecting little Wang Li. Now that things had come to this, how could I just stand by and watch? I was silent for a moment. Then, I extended my hand to take the child from Jean Canwin's hands and gently shook him a few times. Little Wang Li wasn't too shy with strangers. After coaxing him a few times, he opened his pink mouth and smiled, just like before. No matter what, I had insisted on saving little Wang Li. As the saying goes, if you help someone, help them to the end. No matter what, I couldn't watch little Wang Li die for no reason. Chapter 452. Jean Canwin closed his eyes and pondered for a while. He seemed to be organizing his words. I knew this wasn't a trivial matter, so I didn't rush him. I just played with little Wang Li while looking at him with bright eyes. Around 1 minute later, Jean Canwin opened his eyes. With a solemn face, he told me what had happened. That day, I cast a spell on little Wang Li as usual. It's been like this every day. Little Wang Li got used to it. When I cast the spell, his body would be wrapped in Tao energy, and he would lie there motionlessly. After I finished casting the spell, he would start to break free and move around. My Wen Shan cultivation technique has a miraculous effect on suppressing evil beings. Little Wang Li had been nurtured by me for a long time, and his body had become stronger. It seemed that the evil being's influence on him was slowly weakening. At that time, I was confident that it wouldn't be a problem to help little Wang Li get through these 2 years. But who would have thought that when I cast a spell to nurse him back to health that day, little Wang Li suddenly became very agitated. He bared his teeth and shouted. Later, he became even more restless. His legs and feet kicked around randomly. His emotions were very unstable. Jean Canwin recalled the situation and felt a little scared. After a moment of silence, he continued. At first, I thought it was just a child throwing a tantrum, so I didn't care and continued to cast a spell. But when I was casting the Wen Shan spell, little Wang Li's body became more and more restless. All kinds of meridians appeared on his arms, and his blood vessels suddenly bulged. It was as if I had just woken up from a dream. I knew that the evil being had awakened. I couldn't imagine how a chubby baby could have all the meridians in his body bulging. I couldn't wait to ask what happened after that. At that time, I realized that something was wrong, so I quickly stopped casting the spell and went to check on little Wang Li. Who knew that at this time, little Wang Li suddenly sat up and looked at me angrily. Then, he reached out and tapped my lower abdomen. That's how you got hurt? I pointed at Jean Canwin's arm. Jean Canwin smiled wryly. Not only that, but the 6th Tao energy source stone that had just formed in my body was also smashed by him. What? I opened my eyes wide. I remembered that Zhang Kanwen had mentioned to me in the feng shui metaphysics shop that he could vaguely feel that he could break through to the six-star knowledge realm. Zhang Kanwen was a cultivation genius, and with the protection of the One Shan cultivation technique, breaking through to the six-star knowledge realm was just a matter of time for him. I didn't expect that the sixth Tao energy source stone that had just formed would be smashed by Little Wang Li's finger. I had met countless masters before, including some heavenly masters. But after so many fierce battles, no one had been able to break the Tao energy source stone in my body. For cultivators, cultivation was like a second life. Once the Tao Qi source stone was formed in a person's body, it would become a part of the person's body and would not change easily. The Tao Qi source stone in his body was shattered, and the feeling was as if a certain organ in the human body had been smashed, and it was even more serious because the Tao Qi source stone at the bottom of the mortal heaven meridian was a body of energy, and it contained a huge amount of energy and was extremely tough. Little Wang Ziado, but how? And how much? How little kid, how it contained? I gawked and couldn't believe what Zhang Kanwen had just said. If that was the case, then the cultivation of the evil creature residing in Little Wang Li's body was not much lower than that of the sacrificial evil spirit. Once this thing awakens, let alone the two of us, I'm afraid that even the old president, who's always elusive, might not be a match for it. If such an evil being were to come out of seclusion, who could stop it? Probably noticing my expression, Zhang Kanwen smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "You don't believe me. When Little Wang Li injured me, Lu Chuanda and Xie Chenhua came in. Little Wang Li just stared at them, and the two of them were heavily injured that almost died." My expression became solemn. The first time I had met the sacrificial evil spirit, he had injured me and Chen Yangting with just a glance. Even Yin Nantian couldn't withstand the might of his gaze. This detail further proved how terrifying the evil being hiding in Little Wang Li's body was. However, I still had my doubts about Zhang Kanwen's Tao, Qi, and Zhang Kanwen's origin stone being shattered. After thinking for a moment, I activated my spell. I held Little Wang Li with my left hand and formed a strange gesture with my right thumb and ring finger. I gently tapped on my glabella and chanted, "Wang." Instantly, a golden slit appeared between my eyebrows. It was like a third eye that had appeared out of nowhere, and I looked at the bottom of Zhang Kanwen's veins of the sky. This spell was called the Wang Formula. It was a spell that could only be mastered at the Sky Master Realm. Although I hadn't officially reached the Sky Master Realm yet, after mastering the 9-star Heavenly Dipper, mastering this spell was only a matter of time. After activating the spell, the golden slit between my eyebrows released a few streaks of golden light that silently shot towards Zhang Kanwen. Instantly, I could see the movement of Zhang Kanwen's veins of the sky and meridians. After activating the Wang Formula, a Sky Master could open his sky eye. At that time, everything in the Earth Master's body would be seen by the Sky Master. This was also why the Earth Master had no secrets in his eyes. The 5 neatly arranged origin stones at the bottom of Zhang Kanwen's veins of the sky were slightly erratic. The white Tao energy flowed through his body along his 8 extraordinary meridians. Apart from the slight delay at his injured right arm, the other parts of his body were unobstructed. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. What was going on? After a cultivator's Tao, Qi, origin stone was shattered, it would be the same as an injury to his internal organs. There would definitely be some traces left behind. But why couldn't Zhang Kanwen, who had the 6th Tao, Qi, origin stone, be able to see anything? I was puzzled. I grabbed the jade bracelet with my right hand and desperately absorbed the true dragon's Qi, activating the secret spell again. At that moment, the arrangement at the bottom of Zhang Kanwen's veins of the sky became clearer. I examined it for a long time before I finally found some clues. Although there were 5 Tao, Qi, origin stones neatly arranged at the bottom of Zhang Kanwen's veins of the sky, there were some white dregs next to the origin stones. They looked a little like gravel. They were very small and couldn't be seen without looking carefully. In the process of cultivation, the origin stone was formed the moment the Tao broke through. In other words, a person at the 5-star knowledge realm could only have 5 origin stones in their body. There wouldn't be any more than that. In other words, the gravel at the bottom of Zhang Kamwen's veins of the sky was left behind when the 6th Tao, Qi, origin stone was shattered. The origin stone was originally an energy body formed by Tao or shaman Qi. It was as tough as steel. It was impossible for ordinary power to shatter it. It was hard to imagine how much external power Zhang Kanwen had endured. I let out a long sigh. I had no choice but to believe it now. It seemed that the evil being residing in little Wang Li's body had an extraordinary cultivation. Otherwise, how could it have such power? It had forcefully shattered the Tao, Qi, origin stone. This power was simply beyond my imagination. If the evil being hadn't been in a deep sleep and wasn't familiar with its power, I'm afraid that it would have killed Zhang Kanwen on the spot. No wonder Lu Chuanda was so scared back at the hotel. I sighed and retracted my heaven eye. I shook my head and said, "This power is unbelievable." Zhang Kanwen was knowledgeable and wasn't curious about me using the Wang formula. He said seriously, "The evil being residing in Sister Tong Zihua's body is restricted by the tunnel, so it can only use 1% or even 1,000th of its power. Even so, I can't fight back at all. I'm worried that if this evil being awakens one day, no one will be its match." Looking at little Wang Li, who was sleeping soundly in my arms, I was a little annoyed. Was it right for me to insist on saving this child? Now that the evil being residing in little Wang Li's body was so strong, even if I summoned the sacrificial evil spirit, it might not be its match. What should I do? Zhang Kinwen seemed to see through my thoughts and said firmly, "Zhou Yi, the evil being in little Wang Li's body has an extraordinary cultivation. If you and I can't stop this evil being from coming out of seclusion, I will definitely kill little Wang Li. I know you can't bear to do that, and neither can I. But I've thought about it carefully during this time. If this evil being comes out of seclusion, it won't harm little Wang Li alone. I can't ignore the people in the world just because of little Wang Li." Zhang Kamwen's face was very serious, and his tone didn't waver. It was obvious that he had already made up his mind. I sighed dejectedly and didn't know what to say. I just hoped that day would come later and that little Wang Li would give me more time. Back then, I insisted on saving little Wang Li and dug this pit myself. Now, I could only bury it myself. But now I thought about it again. Wang Kuan had just become a father, and he was already involved in such an accident. Little Wang Li was just an innocent baby. Didn't he have the right to live? Did I really have to let this harmless baby in my arms die for the so-called people in the world? Little Wang Li was fast asleep in my arms, snoring softly. He was no different from an ordinary baby. Shouldn't he be able to enjoy the happiness of his family like an ordinary child? Thinking about this, I gritted my teeth and said, "Brother Zhang, give me 1 year. I will definitely save little Wang Li." I had Tong Tong, the snake spirit, Xiao Jin, and the sacrificial evil spirit. Moreover, my current realm was just a step away from the heavenly master realm. Give me 1 year to prepare. Could I let this evil being overturn the sky? Although I was deceiving myself, I still comforted myself. However, Zhang Kanwen didn't seem to agree with my confidence. He waved his hand and said with a wry smile, "I'm afraid you don't have 1 year. In theory, little Wang Li should have 1.5 years of peace after he passes the half-year mark. But now that the evil being has awakened, it means that the evil spirit's bloodline is awakening faster. Maybe in half a year, or even 2 months, the evil being will completely awaken. At that time, it will break out of little Wang Li's body. If we don't kill Wang Li before that, when the evil being breaks out, I'm afraid the world will become a charaba." Zhang Kamwen's words were like a bucket of cold water pouring down on me, extinguishing the last bit of my confidence. However, I couldn't help but look at little Wang Li in my arms. Everyone had the right to live. Little Wang Li was just an innocent baby. Why did he have to bear so many things that he shouldn't have? Brother Zhang, I must save little Wang Li. If I don't succeed, I'll die for a good cause. No matter what, I can't watch little Wang Li die for no reason. If we try our best and still can't save him, I have no objection to killing him. But if you want to determine his fate just because of the possibility of the future, I can't agree. It was probably because I thought of my parents who had died long ago that I felt a little emotional. Everyone had the right to live. Wasn't it every child's dream to be at their mother's knee? What's more, putting myself in his shoes, if I were little Wang Li and my fate was decided by others before I was born, how could I be reconciled to it? The lives of the people in the world were indeed important. I understood the principle of choosing the lesser of two evils. But to little Wang Li, his life was everything. The people in the world had the right to live, and so did he. Chapter 453. After listening to my words, Zhang Kanwen didn't say anything else. After a moment of silence, he sighed and said, "Since you insist, then try it. But Zhou Yi, you have to remember that after we try, if we still can't get rid of that evil thing, or if I find that we don't have the ability to deal with that evil thing, I will risk my life to kill Wang Li and stop that evil thing from being born. At that time, don't stop me again." I didn't say anything else and just nodded. Obviously, this was Zhang Kanwen's bottom line. In fact, I also knew that if we didn't nip the danger in the bud, it would be hard to say if we still had the ability to kill Wang Li when that evil thing was born. But after all, there was still time and hope. It was far from the time of despair. After we looked at each other in silence for a while, Zhang Kanwen suddenly took out something that looked like a magic artifact. This thing was square and wrapped in a piece of yellow silk. Without using my spiritual sense, I could easily feel that this thing was emitting a strong Tao aura. It wasn't strange that a magic artifact that a feng shui master nurtured could emit Tao aura. But what was strange was that the magic artifact in Zhang Kanwen's hand was emitting a strong Tao aura. Even with my current cultivation, I felt a little shocked. I even faintly felt an aura similar to the aura around the Xianyuan sword case. What kind of magic artifact was this to have such an aura? Zhang Kanwen didn't say anything. Instead, he put the square magic artifact on the table in front of him and carefully opened the yellow silk covering the surface. Under the yellow silk was an inkstone that faintly glowed with a cold light. Without cover, the strong Tao aura of the inkstone magic artifact spread out without any regard for the cost. It was like a small dragon vein. "Brother Zhang, this is..." I couldn't help but ask, what kind of magic artifact could have such an aura? Even without using it, one could tell that the power of this magic tool was extraordinary. Why did Zhang Kanwen suddenly take this thing out for me to see? Zhang Kanwen's expression was solemn, like a soldier being inspected. He held the inkstone and said solemnly, "This magic artifact is the treasure of my Mount One lineage, Mount One inkstone. When Shanyan, I have seen many celestial artifacts of the celestial master, but I have never seen such a tyrannical celestial artifact. The intensity of the Taoist qi that it exudes is even far from that of the stone of Mount Tai that I saw in Shenzhen metaphysics. Furthermore, this was merely an enchanted item. It was not like the stone of Mount Tai that was nurtured by the heavens and the earth. For to have such a strong magnetic field was truly inconceivable." Zhang Kanwen wasn't in a hurry to tell me about Wen Shanyan's background, but first smiled and said, "Aren't you surprised that I can see through your glorious consciousness great perfection realm with my glorious consciousness 5-star realm? Logically speaking, it was impossible for a person with a lower cultivation to see through a person with a higher cultivation. This was common sense." I nodded. "Of course I'm surprised. Could it be because of Wen Shanyan? Could it be that this Wen Shanyan is like my 8th step astral, allowing people to see through everything?" Zhang Kanwen affirmed, "That's right. It's because I have the Wen Shanyan with me that I can see through your cultivation. The Tao Qi that this enchanted item is emitting is so thick, but why didn't I sense anything when you brought it with you?" This Wen Shanyan was simply too strange. Although the celestial master enchanted items that I had seen before were powerful, they were rarely able to conceal their aura. How did this Wen Shanyan do it? Not only can Wen Shanyan see through your cultivation, but he can also conceal his aura. Unless your cultivation is higher than Ancestor Wen Tianxiang, you definitely won't be able to sense its aura. Furthermore, as long as I don't take it out, you won't be able to find it even if you search my entire body, Zhang Kanwen said calmly. His words shocked me. This Wen Shanyan had completely subverted my understanding. Concealing aura was still all right. On the path of cultivation, there are all sorts of miraculous spells and enchanted items. Concealment wasn't anything special. What I found strange was his last sentence. As long as he didn't take it out, a person with a high cultivation wouldn't be able to find it even if they searched his body. This was extraordinary. Enchanted items, no matter how miraculous they were still inanimate objects. They had to be controlled by a person in order to display their might. If no one was controlling them, they wouldn't be much different from other inanimate objects. However, the meaning behind Zhang Kanwen's words was clear. This enchanted item could conceal itself and didn't require human control. Could it be that this enchanted item has given birth to an artifact spirit? I couldn't help but blurt out the thought that popped up in my mind. The word artifact spirit wasn't unfamiliar to me. Back when I first discovered the serpent spirit, I thought it was the artifact spirit of the ancient Luopan. Back then, my cultivation was still shallow, and I only knew about artifact spirits, but I didn't know what they were. In reality, the serpent spirit could only be considered a fake artifact spirit, not a true one. The serpent spirit was merely a soul that lived inside the Luopan. A true artifact spirit was created out of nothing, from within the enchanted item. Anything with intelligence could be called a living being. Essentially, creating something out of nothing was the birth of life. It was an extremely difficult process. Even a heavenly master couldn't understand the principles behind it, much less set foot in it. That was why I had never seen an enchanted item with a true artifact spirit after so many years. Who knew that I would see one in Zhang Kanwen's hands today? However, I still had some doubts. Was there really an artifact spirit in this inkstone? Hearing my question, Zhang Kanwen was slightly surprised, but he still answered calmly. That's right. This Wen Shanyan has indeed developed intelligence. My eyes widened again. Enchanted items were nurtured by a feng shui master, so it wasn't strange for it to develop magic power or be contaminated with Tao energy. However, developing intelligence was something that could only be found by chance. Not only did it require a feng shui master's cultivation to surpass a heavenly master's realm, but also required all sorts of opportunities. The chances were like finding a needle in a haystack. What kind of opportunity did Wen Shanyan's lineage have to obtain such a treasure? I exhaled and calmed down a little. Then, I continued to ask, where did this Wen Shanyan come from? Zhang Kanwen took the sleeping little Wang Li and handed me the Wen Shanyan so that I could carefully feel the aura on it. I calmed my mind, but my palms couldn't help but feel hot. I scanned it with my spiritual sense and immediately felt a strong grudge aura. That's right, it was a grudge. For a moment, it was as if I was in an ancient battlefield. Two groups of people were fighting with their lives on the line. Swords pierced through flesh and blood, and flesh flew everywhere. It seemed that each of the fierce warriors had a great hatred in their hearts, and they wanted to kill each other as soon as they saw each other. My spiritual sense had only probed for a few seconds when I felt my head swell. The grudge aura was like a needle being injected into my body. In an instant, my eyeballs swelled and my murderous aura rose. The veins on my palms couldn't help but bulge. I was in a state of near berserk. At the same time, the Tao energy in my body suddenly became manic. The Tao energy that had been nourishing the 8 extraordinary meridians seemed to have turned into sharp needles that pricked my meridians. It was very uncomfortable. In a split second, the curse in my body expanded like a balloon that was being inflated. Brother Zhou, you don't need to circulate your energy to resist it. You just need to silently say, the Yuan dynasty is only 100 years old. Just as I was on the verge of going berserk, Zhang Kanwen's voice rang in my ears like a bell. I did as he said. My originally manic meridians suddenly calmed down, and the Tao energy started to circulate gently like before. The other cycle of shaman energy didn't fluctuate like before, and everything returned to normal. In an instant, my body returned to normal. There was no transition in between. I asked John Canwin, "What kind of spell was that?" I looked at the one Shan inkstone in my hand with lingering fear. When the artifact exerted its power, I couldn't even think of resisting. That feeling was similar to when I faced the Liu family's celestial master when I was still in the early stages of glory of consciousness. I couldn't control my body at all, and my entire body was being controlled. It wasn't a spell, just a simple sentence, John Canwin said. But how could a simple sentence make such a powerful artifact retract its power? What was the story behind it? Jean Canwin's artifact was really unimaginable. Jean Canwin said, "This one Shan Inkstone was an artifact that my ancestor, Wen Tianxiang, had nurtured since he was young. My ancestor's cultivation wasn't ordinary, so this artifact was naturally nurtured into an extraordinary power. After my ancestor was defeated and captured, he was imprisoned by the Mongolians. He knew that he didn't have long to live, so before he died, he spat his blood on this one Shan Inkstone, cursing the Yuan dynasty to be only 100 years old. That's why this artifact has such a strong curse. Moreover, this one Shan Inkstone has already developed intelligence, so you just need to silently say the Yuan dynasty is only 100 years old, and you will be able to unseal the power of this Inkstone." Jean Canwin's story was shocking to me. So there was such a story hidden in history. From this story, this one Shan Inkstone seemed to be much stronger than I had imagined. The fate of a nation was very illusory, but just like the heavenly Tao, it was illusory yet real. Moreover, it was incomparably strong, and it wasn't something that a human could fight against. But this Inkstone could actually curse the fate of a nation. This kind of power didn't belong to a human. When Tianxiang was able to create the dragon vein and summon the sacrificial evil spirit, so his cultivation wasn't ordinary. At the very least, he was at the peak of the Yang God celestial master level. This one Shan Inkstone had Wen Tianxiang's blood and cursed the fate of the Yuan dynasty, so it made sense that it could develop intelligence. At that time, when a Meizhou branch's president coveted the one Shan lineage, he was able to attract the full help of the Liu family in the capital. I believe that the Liu family also coveted the one Shan Inkstone. However, why did Jean Canwin show me this one Shan Inkstone? Since the one Shan Inkstone was the one Shan lineage's treasure, it shouldn't be easily shown to others. Why did Jean Canwin do this? This treasure is so exquisite. As the saying goes, treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Naturally, the less people know about this, the better. Why did Brother Zhang show me this item? Jean Canwin shook the sleeping little Wang Li in his arms. Isn't it because of him? Oh, could this thing help little Wang Li overcome his difficulties? I suddenly became spirited. Brother Zhang, have you already thought of a way to save little Wang Li? Jean Canwin shook his head. It's just an idea. I don't know if it will work or not. Magic tools like inkstones and paperweights have a suppressive power. The Winshan Inkstone is even more so. When it exerts force, it feels like a 10,000 gene cauldron is pressing down on a person's body. No matter what it is, it will be extremely difficult to bear. According to my original plan, if we want to save little Wang Li, we have to force our way into the pit and fight against the evil creature hiding inside. I believe you also have the same plan. But have you ever thought that although the pit looks shallow, it's actually a mountain that can kill a horse? There are thousands of ravines inside, not to mention whether or not we could defeat the evil creature. Just entering it and looking for it will cost us a lot of energy. So, after careful consideration, I decided that instead of killing the evil creature, it would be better to suppress it. Although this method is a bit conservative, it has a higher chance of success. And to use the suppression method, we need a top suppressive magic tool. You mean to say that when the evil creature wakes up, we should use this when Shan Inkstone to suppress it? Jean Canwin said it with certainty, and my heart gave birth to hope. That's right. Zhang Kanwen nodded and continued. When the evil creature wakes up, its body will instantly increase by thousands of times and break out of the pit. At that time, we will use this Shan Inkstone to suppress it in one fell swoop. This Inkstone can suppress the fate of a country, so it should be able to suppress this evil creature. And the reason why I took out this Shan Inkstone is because I want you to use a secret technique to activate this Shan Inkstone. Let me activate the Shan Inkstone, I said in surprise. Logically speaking, this Shan Inkstone is a magic tool of the Shan lineage. It's already very rare for Zhang Kanwen to show it to me. Why would he want me to activate this Shan Inkstone? That's right, this matter can only be done by you. Now that my Dao Qi Source Stone has been shattered, my cultivation can't advance in a short period of time. And if you want to activate this Shan Inkstone, you need at least the cultivation of a heavenly master. The reason why I didn't mention this before was because, first, it was just a guess of mine. Second, you and I haven't reached the heavenly master realm. Although you're only a fine line away from the heavenly master realm, many times a fine line is the difference between heaven and earth. But since you insist on saving little Wang Li, the only thing I can do is to tell you this method. And you must quickly break through that barrier and reach the heavenly master realm. Chapter 454. Every cultivator wanted to reach the heavens in one step and become a heavenly master. For this purpose, who knows how many people would take the risk of being condemned by the world? But in the end, how many people could successfully advance to heavenly master? It was already not easy to advance to glory consciousness, great perfection. Just like Zhang Kanwen said, although it was only a fine line, it was like a chasm. How many people stayed at glory consciousness, great perfection for their entire lives, unable to advance? It was said to be a thin layer of window paper, but in reality, it was an insurmountable chasm. Strictly speaking, I was lucky. After absorbing the huge amount of shaman energy in Tai Sui's body, my cultivation improved greatly. The amount of shaman energy in my body was dozens of times that of an ordinary glory, consciousness, great perfection cultivator. I was afraid that it was not inferior to those yang, God, heavenly masters. More importantly, I was very sure that I had already pushed open the door of Tao. As long as I was willing, I could advance to heavenly master at any time. That insurmountable chasm, I have already crossed it. For me, the chasm was not in cultivation, but in the two Miaojiang ancestral venomous insects in my body. A lifetime of bitter cultivation, but in the end, it was a wedding dress for others. No one would be willing to encounter such a thing. Therefore, before I resolved the hidden danger in my body, it was impossible for me to forcefully advance to heavenly master. I thought that I had a benevolent heart, but I couldn't do the saintly act of cutting off my own flesh to feed an eagle. Little Wang Li's life was very important. As long as it was within my ability, I would definitely save him, even if I had to sacrifice some of my own interests and take some risks. But this didn't mean that I would ignore the hidden danger in my body and risk everything to save him. I wasn't that kind of saint after all. It was just that this way, I couldn't help but feel a little guilty in my heart. I stood there for a long time without saying anything. After a long time, I sighed. For now, I could only wait for the sacrificial evil spirit to return quickly and help me solve the trouble in my body. It was just that I didn't have much confidence. The sacrificial evil spirit's origin was mysterious, and it had always been seen and not seen. I really didn't know when he would return. Seeing that I didn't speak for a long time, Zhang Kanwen frowned and asked, "Zhou Yi, are you not confident?" I shook my head and smiled bitterly, but I didn't mention my predicament. I sighed. Breaking through realms has always depended on luck. It doesn't matter if you have confidence or not. Luck is the most elusive thing. I really can't say for sure. Let's not talk about me. I remember that Brother Zhang has the Song of Righteousness that can help you reach the heavenly master realm temporarily. When the time comes, can you use the power of the ancient book to activate Shan Yan? Zhang Kanwen had used the ancient copy of the Song of Righteousness many times in the mausoleum of the Shang dynasty to enter the realm of the Heavenly Master for a short period of time. I didn't think of this before, but now, as I spoke, I suddenly had this thought. Thinking about this, my heart calmed down slightly. If this method worked, then it couldn't be any better. I wouldn't have to be so conflicted in my heart. Unfortunately, things weren't as simple as I thought. After Zhang Kanwen heard my words, he immediately shook his head and said, "If that's the case, why would I have the thought of killing little Wang Li? That evil being's cultivation is very high. Using Wenshan Yin to suppress, it is just an idea of mine. I can't be sure whether it will succeed or not. At most, I only have a 70 to 80% chance of success. Even if I don't consider this, the process of suppressing it won't be completed in one go. I used one page of the ancient book to help me reach the Heavenly Master realm for 4 hours. Although it's called Heavenly Master, it's still far from the real Heavenly Master realm. And this one, Shan Yin, is a spiritual immortal artifact. Activating it requires even more majestic Dao Qi. At that time, my cultivation as a pseudo-Heavenly Master is far from enough. So, Zhou Yi, if you want to save little Wang Li, you still have to rely on your advancement to the Heavenly Master realm to have a glimmer of hope. Using external objects and truly reaching the Heavenly Master realm were indeed different, and the difference was quite large. I naturally understood this principle. In fact, when I asked that question just now, I already knew this would be the result, but I still had a trace of fantasy in my heart. After this fantasy was completely shattered, I didn't think too much about it. Because I was worried that I would hurt Zhang Kanwen, I didn't mention the predicament I was facing. I just said lightly, "After all, there's still time. I will definitely try my best to advance to the Heavenly Master realm." Zhang Kanwen nodded and didn't say anything more. He reached out to take little Wang Li from my arms and said, "It's getting late. You must be tired after a long journey. Rest early. We'll visit little Wang Li tomorrow." At this moment, the sky was indeed very late. After saying goodnight to Zhang Kanwen, I walked away. Who knew that when I reached the door, I would see Wang Yongjun, Wang Kuan, and his wife the moment I opened the door. At this moment, the three of them were tiptoeing outside. When I suddenly walked out, the three of them were startled. Their bodies paused on the spot, and their faces were slightly embarrassed. When I was talking just now, I heard some movement outside the door. However, because I didn't feel any fluctuation of Dao Qi, I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't think that this family would come to eavesdrop on my conversation with Zhang Kanwen. This, Master Zhou, Wang Kuan scratched his head and his face was slightly red. He was caught eavesdropping. At that moment, he didn't know whether to leave or stay. He was so embarrassed that he didn't know where to put his hands. Actually, their reactions were already fast enough. However, I already had the cultivation of a quasi-heavenly master. My pace was also much faster than ordinary people. The speed at which I came out of the house was so fast that they couldn't escape in time. "Master Zhou, Master Zhang, we heard what you said just now. Thank you for doing your best to save Wang Li. Wang Yongjun, thank you here. Wang Kuan, come over and kowed out to the two masters. Thank the two masters for saving his life." Wang Yongjun was experienced. He didn't say anything more about eavesdropping. Instead, he pulled Wang Kuan to kneel before Zhang Kanwen and me. After Wang Kuan and his wife knelt down, Wang Yongjun said, "Master Zhou and Master Zhang, please don't blame us. Our family was also very afraid when Wang Li injured Master Zhang. We couldn't think of a reason. This time, when I saw the two of you talking in secret, I really couldn't hold it in. I was too abrupt and offended the two masters." Wang Yongjun's face was pale. He was grateful and apologetic, but at the same time, he was a little panicked. After saying that, he knocked his head on the ground heavily. Ever since I came to Shenzhen to solve the matter of the goo poison woman, I had a lot of contact with Wang Yongjun over the years. In his heart, I was probably a godlike figure. Zhang Kanwen was also quite famous in Guangzhou. I reckoned that in Wang Yongjun's heart, the two of us were the only people who could save little Wang Li. Therefore, this business giant who had been in the business world for many years actually knelt and kowtowed personally to ask for help. Wang Yongjun, who had no children, had always regarded Wang Kun as his own. He even treated little Wang Li as his own grandson. Masters, please save little Wang Li. No matter how much money I spend, I, Wang Yongjun, won't even frown. As Wang Yongjun spoke, he couldn't help but burst into tears. At his age, money was no longer important. What was important was the health of his family and the happiness of his family. Wang Kun and his wife, who had just become parents for the first time, were crying even more. Their tears flowed freely, especially Wang Kun's wife, who had already burst into tears. Little Wang Li in my arms was all their hope. For this family in front of me, there was nothing more important than this evil, possessed baby. I've seen this saying before. How can one prove that a person has stayed in this world for a while? Money? There will always be a time when it's spent. Property? There will always be a time when it's demolished and rebuilt. The best evidence to prove that a person has been in this world for a while is to leave behind children. Incense can grow and multiply endlessly, like a baton passed on from generation to generation. The sleeping baby in my arms is the incense that passes on the baton of this family in front of me. I can understand how much of a blow Wang Kun and his wife would feel if they lost this child. I could understand how much pain Wang Yongjun, who was over 50 years old, would feel if he lost this grandson. Didn't I just go through a huge change in my family? The tree wants peace, but the wind doesn't stop. The tearful looks of the three people in front of me reminded me of my parents, the hard-working and honest father, and a nagging mother. Weren't my parents like that when the Liu family's bastards threatened me? Back then, in order to save me, my parents kept kowtowing to the Liu family's bastards. Didn't they also do it to save my life? As parents, they actually didn't have any extravagant hopes for their children. They just hoped that their children could live well. Now, the hearts of the three people in front of me are probably not much different from what my parents thought back then. At this moment, I was still holding little Wang Li in my arms. I quickly passed little Wang Li to Wang Kun's wife and pulled Wang Yongjun. Uncle Wang, quickly get up. The ground is cold. Little Wang Li and I hit it off very well. I will definitely try my best to save him. Zhang Kinwen seemed to be greatly moved. He quickly helped them up. You are also muddle-headed. I am little Wang Li's master, and I have just received the ceremony of becoming his disciple. You want to save him, so how can I bear to see him die? My Wang family is here to thank the two of you for your great kindness. The two of us finally managed to pull the three of them up. Wang Yongjun was extremely excited. He even said that if we could cure little Wang Li, he wouldn't hesitate to take out half of his family's assets to thank us. Zhang Kanwen and I were both cultivators, so we didn't care much about money. We didn't mind his words. After comforting them for a long time, they finally calmed down and left with their children. Looking at the lonely silhouettes of this family as they left, I felt even more upset. To the people of the world, little Wang Li was now a great threat. The person living in the pit in his chest might be an evildoer with extremely high cultivation. If he was allowed to come into being, it was not impossible for him to destroy all living beings. But to the Wang family, little Wang Li was just a newborn baby, the only hope of their family. Not to mention that Wang Yongjun has always been a great help to me. I will definitely do my best to protect this little Wang Li who loves to cry and laugh. But the goo in my body, thinking about this, I couldn't help but sigh. Zhang Kanwen wasn't as conflicted as I was, but his unshaven face looked more determined. No matter what, I will do my best. It's just that there's still a long way to go. He is different from me, just like how he would rather kill little Wang Li than let the evil thing in little Wang Li's body come out and wreak havoc in the world. If we were in the same situation right now, I believe that he will definitely choose to sacrifice himself for justice. People are different, so I won't feel ashamed. It's just that the apologetic feeling in my heart grew deeper, and at the same time, there was a sense of helplessness in my heart. Zhang Kanwen is willing to sacrifice himself for justice, but there's no other way. I have a way, but I can't abandon life and death. Most things in the world are like this, and there's nothing I can do." After a moment of silence, both of us felt a little heavy. We didn't speak again and returned to our rooms. After the feng shui metaphysics shop was rebuilt, the internal structure was also changed a lot. The room that was specially prepared for me was very big, and it was decorated in traditional Chinese style. There was a huge landscape painting screen, the gold-plated walls, and the exquisite wooden bed. The floor wasn't modern, but ancient blue bricks. There was an exquisite tea set on a round table in the living room. There was a set of brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the log desk. Even the pillars were carved with various exquisite patterns. It was obvious that they had put a lot of effort into it. At this time, my mood was a little heavy, and I wasn't in the mood to admire the surroundings. After entering the door, I took off my shoes and lay on the bed, continuing to think about how to save little Wang Li. Until now, I didn't know much about the evil thing in little Wang Li's body. Other than knowing that this thing's cultivation was very high, I knew almost nothing. But that wasn't important. The only important thing was whether I could become a heavenly master. Chapter 455. According to feng shui metaphysics, it wasn't good to have too many mirrors in the bedroom, as it would damage one's luck. I looked around and found that there was only one bronze mirror on the washstand in my room. The bedroom was decorated according to the ancient style, which was to control the feng shui of this place. Besides a copper basin and a few towels on the wooden washstand, there was also a bronze mirror. The bronze mirror wasn't big, but it was big enough to reflect half of my body. I took off my shirt and began to observe the tattoo on my chest and back. The tattoo on my chest had a lion's head, deer's antlers, tiger's eyes, elk's body, dragon scales, an ox's tail, and a horn with meat. Together with a huge body underneath, it was an obvious Qilin tattoo. As my cultivation base increased, the tattoo on my chest had changed from a simple Qilin head to a vivid Qilin tattoo. However, when I looked carefully, I frowned. When the Qilin goo was first planted, there was a faint Qilin tattoo on my body. As my cultivation base increased, the tattoo also grew. The longest Qilin horn had reached my collarbone, and its body had grown to my abdomen. According to what Yang Shilong had said, as the cultivation base of the victim increased, the Qilin goo would also grow until it broke out of the ground. Of course, I wasn't surprised by this, but the color of the Qilin. When the Qilin goo was first planted, the Qilin tattoo was a mixture of dark green and dark green. Later, as the tattoo grew, the color became darker and darker until it was as black as ink. According to Yang Shilong, the deeper the goo was, the darker the ink would be. When a victim broke through to the heavenly minter level, the Qilin goo would turn into the darkest black color. It would then break free from the victim and fly into the sky. However, as I cultivated, the color of the Qilin goo became lighter. I hadn't noticed it before, but now I realized that the dark green Qilin goo had turned into a light black color. It was strange. According to the ancient records of the Qilin goo had fused with the human goo. The human's cultivation base was the Qilin goo's cultivation base. In other words, as my cultivation base increased, the Qilin tattoo on my body would become darker. When I reached the heavenly master realm, the Qilin goo would turn into the darkest black color. Then, it would leave my body and return to the old Wiccan Miaojiang. But now that my realm had increased and I was close to breaking through to the heavenly master realm, the Qilin goo would turn into the darkest black color. Then it would leave my body and fly back to the old Wiccan Miaojiang. The Qilin goo was cultivated by the people of Miaojiang with great effort. It had a huge amount of energy, and as it continued to absorb the energy of the person who was poisoned, the energy in it would become thicker and thicker. It could be said that the lines that formed the tattoo were huge energy bodies. But since it was an energy body, as it absorbed more and more energy, there was no reason for the lines of the tattoo to become fainter and fainter. Chi-chi to goo-goo-goo-goo-goo chi-chi, to be much, it to it, and had to absorb. Qilin to the Qilin goo energy. Shaking my head, I put this question aside for the time being and turned to look at the back. On my back, the ink dragon tattoo was still vivid and lifelike. When the snake spirit had returned, it had said that it needed the saliva of the real dragon to transform. In other words, it needed the blood of the person who had swallowed the dragon saliva. That was why it had possessed my body. Strictly speaking, the snake spirit dragon wasn't the one that the old witch had implanted in me. I had willingly accepted it. Following the snake spirit's transformation, the color of the ink dragon tattoo became darker. The vivid expression was like a real ink dragon hovering in the sky, looking down on everything. But why was the color of the qilin on my chest getting lighter and lighter, while the ink dragon's color was so thick? Still suspicious, I summoned the snake spirit. I, Lord Snake Immortal, am currently sleeping. Which idiot dares to disturb my peace? Aren't you afraid that I'll swallow you alive? The snake spirit that I had summoned seemed to be hibernating. It didn't even lift its eyes as it shouted arrogantly. It was still as lively as ever. I said angrily, I'm the one who woke you up. I have something to ask you. When the spirit snake heard my voice, he blushed and came closer. Oh, it's you, Brother Zhou. I was sleeping just now. I didn't expect that you would call me. If I had known earlier, I would have come here. You wouldn't have needed to summon me. I told you, the voice that called me was powerful. After transforming, the snake spirit had the appearance of a beautiful boy. However, its duck voice hadn't changed. It made people feel uncomfortable. I waved my hand and interrupted the snake spirit. All right, don't talk nonsense. I have something to ask you. Brother Zhou, if there's anything you don't know, just ask. As long as I know, no. As long as I know, I will tell you everything I know. If you need my help, just tell me. If you tell me go east, I won't go west. If you tell me to beat the dog, you won't beat the dog, right? I said coldly. This fellow's flattery was always simple and crude. Moreover, it was the same few lines that had been used for tens of thousands of years. It made people's hands itch, and they wanted to slap him. The snake spirit scratched its head embarrassedly. It rubbed its horn that had just grown out. Brother Zhou, if you need anything, I will do my best, all right. I hurried to interrupt him. If I let him talk, I didn't know what else he would say. I asked, after the Kirin parasite is infected, will the color of the tattoo become darker as the victim's power increases? It was a question that I already knew the answer to. As soon as I finished asking, the snake spirit said, of course. After the Kirin parasite resides in the human body, it will crazily absorb the victim's energy. It seems to have established some kind of restriction that allows it to share the same root and body with the victim. The Kirin parasite can instantly increase the victim's cultivation base. Its color will also change from greenish-black to black, then to black. Then, it will leave the human body and become a heavenly master parasite. The victim can also use this Kirin parasite to become a heavenly master. Many evil old parasite women in Miaojiang used this ability to become a heavenly master. The serpent spirit had lived in the jungles of the southern region before it died. It had been refined into a dragon goo, so it knew a lot about venomous insects. As soon as it heard my question, it told me everything it knew. Then, it looked at me as if it was asking for credit. It looked like a child waiting to be praised by its elders. I frowned. Indeed, it was like that. The Kirin tattoo on my body only appeared after I was infected with the Kirin parasite. To some extent, this tattoo was the Kirin parasite itself. But why did the Kirin parasite absorb my energy and cause its cultivation base to decrease? Then, why did my Kirin tattoo turn from greenish-black to light black 2 years after the old parasite woman infected me with the Kirin parasite? I asked the question in my heart and pointed at the tattoo on my chest. Since the Kirin parasite was planted, it would share the same root and body with the victim. It was a life parasite, but why didn't I feel such an existence in my body? I could summon the snake spirit just by residing in my body. But why didn't my consciousness notice that I had been infected with such a thing? There was no reason. The snake spirit looked at the tattoo on my body carefully. It seemed to be confused, but then it laughed. Ah, that's right. The snake spirit laughed and said, it must be because of me. Haha, Zhou, It seems that I helped you a lot. How are you going to thank me? No matter how powerful the Kirin parasite is, it's just a small worm. My dragon race is the ancestor of worms. With me residing in your body, how would the small Kirin parasite dare to show off? This Kirin parasite is definitely afraid of me, so it doesn't dare to be presumptuous. The snake spirit laughed wildly, its mouth wide open, and it looked excited. The snake spirit still had the temperament of tearing down the roof if it wasn't beaten for 3 days. Now that it had just transformed into a human form, it actually dared to call itself a dragon. But when I lowered my head and thought about it, I felt that what he said wasn't right. If this Kirin parasite was really afraid of the snake spirit, how could there be a place for the Kirin parasite when the snake spirit resided in my body? Also, the Kirin parasite was a spiritual creature. If the snake spirit could suppress it, it should be easy to summon it. But I didn't hear it mention this. The snake spirit wasn't one to keep his words to himself. If he was really so powerful, he would have come over to take credit long ago. Why hadn't he done anything for so long? I pretended to be surprised and said, "Is what you said true?" "That's for sure. I, Lord Snake, have a peerless cultivation base." "What kind of bubbles do you think you can blow under the palm of Lord Snake? Don't you know who I am? Back in the jungles of Nanyang, I ate a parasite king like it was a meal. How could this small Kirin parasite not be afraid of me?" The snake spirit said arrogantly. I didn't expose it and just smiled. "If that's the case, you can definitely summon this Kirin parasite, right? How about this? I will call Tong Tong out. If you can summon the Kirin parasite to help me solve this problem, I will give you a big gift. If you can't, I will hand you over Tong Tong. How about that?" The snake spirit was most likely bluffing. The Kirin parasite was the ancestor parasite of Miaojiang. Even the sacrificial evil spirit had seen it and specifically told me not to act rashly. How could the snake spirit suppress it? As expected, after I probed, the snake spirit became listless. "Brother Zhou, we are having a good discussion. Why do you have to call me Tong Tong?" Chapter 456. I automatically filtered out the snake spirit's words. Goo worms that could be used by Miaojiang's goo matron were not simple worms. The process of cultivating a goo worm was extremely complicated and bloody. At the same time, it was extremely cruel. The people of Miaojiang had known about goo and raising them since ancient times. They generally divided the process into 3 stages: preliminary selection, cultivation, and formation. In the preliminary stage, they would collect all kinds of poisonous insects and place them in a container, allowing them to kill each other and devour the corpses of their companions. The one who could survive to the end would be the best among them. But even so, this kind of tenacious poisonous insect was not enough to be called a goo. It just passed the preliminary stage. Next, after the selection, these poisonous insects would be raised by the person who raised them. They would be fed with 5-year scorpions, 10-year centipedes, and other poisonous things. This process was to awaken the poisonous insect's intelligence. The scorpion's lifespan was less than 5 years, and the centipede's lifespan was difficult to exceed 10 years. Although these poisonous creatures were not born with intelligence like humans, these old poisonous creatures would eventually develop a trace of intelligence. In the process of feeding, these poisonous insects gradually began to sprout intelligence. After a few years of feeding, these poisonous insects that had sprouted intelligence had to go through another round of fighting. This time, the remaining poisonous insects could officially enter the stage of becoming a goo. After being carefully fed by the person who raised the goo, they would gradually develop intelligence and obey the goo matron's orders. Then, they could finally be called a goo. It could be said that any goo worm was carefully raised by the person who raised the goo. After going through life and death battles again and again, it was not an exaggeration to describe it as outstanding. This was just an ordinary goo worm. As the ancestral goo of Miaojiang, the process of raising the Kirin goo was even more complicated and difficult. The Kirin goo was the natal goo, and it was born a powerful goo worm. It did not need to go through those battles and only needed to be fed carefully. However, In the process of feeding, the person who raised the goo not only had to find those old poisonous insects, but also had to feed it with their own flesh and blood from young, so that the goo worm would recognize their bloodline. Therefore, for ordinary goo worms, the human was the master and the goo was the servant. But for the ancestral goo, the goo was the master and the human was just a servant to feed the parasite. Moreover, the Kirin goo took a long time to grow. It needed a bloodline connected to the family to feed it for a lifetime. The mother died, and the daughter continued. It took several generations to successfully raise one. It was precisely because the process of raising it was so difficult that the Kirin goo had a strong and unique power. Because of this, the Kirin goo could stand at the top of the pyramid and become the king of goo worms. Ordinary goo worms had intelligence, and the Kirin goo's intelligence was no less than a human's. It definitely wouldn't become stupid after eating centipedes and scorpions. After pondering for a while, I shook my head and rejected the snake spirit's absurd idea. However, it was easy to overturn his words. But how could he explain the fact that the Qilin goo's energy was gradually weakening? The Qilin goo was an innate ancestral goo. During the feeding process, it did not eat ordinary insects. They were at least old poisonous insects that had sprouted lingji. In fact, it even had to be fed with other goo worms. With such a method of feeding, one could only imagine the amount of energy contained in its body. Just like back then, the snake spirit was just a ghost, but with the help of the poisonous insects that the old witch fed and the true dragon saliva in my body, it was able to transform from a carp to a dragon. This also proved that the energy of these poisonous insects was extraordinary. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the 5 poisonous items that the old witch in Miao's territory had carefully prepared contained energy that wasn't inferior to the Taoist immortal medicines refined by the heavenly masters of Mount Longhu. Moreover, it was just the poisonous insects. During the process, the one who raised the goo had to use his own flesh and blood to feed them. The old witch's cultivation base wasn't high, but after dozens of years, she had accumulated a terrifying amount of energy. From this, I could guess what kind of energy this little Qilin goo had. According to the characteristics of ordinary goo worms, once they parasitize someone, they could continuously absorb energy from the host to strengthen themselves. I didn't know whether the Qilin goo was different from other goo worms, but even if it didn't absorb my energy, it could still be very strong. It wouldn't be like this. The lines that represented the energy of the Qilin goo didn't become thicker. Quite the contrary. They were becoming fainter. Why could the snake spirit use this energy to transform, but the Qilin goo in my body hadn't done anything since I had planted it? Now, it was getting weaker and weaker. The more I thought about it, the more I felt it was unbelievable. After pondering for a long time, I suddenly remembered what Yang Shilong had told me. He had said that before the Qilin goo broke out, it would continuously improve the host's innate talent, which would help the host's cultivation. At that time, I didn't pay much attention to it. However, now that I thought about it, I felt that it wasn't normal. The Qilin goo could help the host's cultivation. What if the so-called help wasn't improving the host's innate talent like Yang Shilong had said? What if the Qilin goo directly transferred its energy to my body? If that was the case, everything seemed to make sense. These years, my cultivation speed had been very fast. I was even faster than the geniuses of the cultivation families. On one hand, it was because of my hard work and all kinds of miraculous encounters. On the other hand, was it because of the Qilin goo's secret help? And if it transferred its energy to my body, it would naturally weaken the Qilin goo. My heart jumped. If that was the case, I was afraid that my view of the Qilin goo would change. Previously, I had thought that the Qilin goo's intelligence was comparable to a human's. But now, it seemed that it wasn't just comparable. The Qilin goo's intelligence was obviously higher than a human's. Among humans who were born with peerless intelligence, how many of them could distinguish between gains and losses? But this Qilin goo didn't hesitate to give up its energy to help me enter the Sky Master realm. There's a saying in philosophy that you could gain as much as you lose. This saying seemed to be very appropriate here. The Qilin goo could give up its own energy to help me, and in the future, it could absorb all of my cultivation. It was like a cunning schemer hiding in my body, silently watching the plot that it had planted, waiting for the moment it would blossom and bear fruit. After staying silent for a long time, I asked the snake spirit again, "Did you feel the existence of the Qilin goo in my body? Or did you feel a trace of its aura?" Maybe it saw my solemn expression, but the snake spirit didn't bullshit this time. It simply waved its hand. No. This answer wasn't out of my expectations. In fact, it wasn't just the snake spirit. Even I didn't feel the existence of a Qilin goo in my body. After such a long time, the Qilin goo that the old Qilin goo had given me didn't cause any discomfort in my body. I didn't even feel anything. In the past, if I couldn't feel the existence of the Qilin goo, I would be secretly happy and think that I wouldn't be affected. But now, I knew that it wasn't a good thing. It was like a person holding a pen, a cup, or other inanimate objects in their hands. They might be busy with other things and forget about the things in their hands. But if they were holding a cat or a rabbit in their hands, they wouldn't forget them no matter what they were doing. This was the difference between a living thing and an inanimate object. Living things had spirituality, so they naturally had a biological magnetic field that could be easily sensed. The reason why I couldn't sense the Qilin goo wasn't because it didn't have enough spirituality. The only possibility was that it was stronger than me, or even stronger than the snake spirit. It was consciously hiding in my body, making the snake spirit and I unable to find it. Earlier, because of Little Wong Lee's matter, I had the thought of ignoring the threat of the Qilin goo and breaking through to the heavenly master realm. My original thought was that since I was a dual witchcraft cultivator and had practiced the 9-star heavenly dipper, I would be stronger than an ordinary heavenly master. I also had the snake spirit and Tong Tong with me. Perhaps I would have a way to resist the Qilin goo when it acted up. But at this moment, I became cautious again. The power of the Qilin goo might be much stronger than I had imagined. It wasn't a good idea to break through rashly. With this thought, I gradually calmed down and gave up on the idea of taking the risk to break through. Although the Qilin goo was strong, there was still the sacrificial evil spirit. Since he had specifically told me about this, he would have a way to deal with it. For the time being, I pinned all my hopes on him. I shook my head and called back the snake spirit. I didn't think about this matter anymore and lay on the bed to sleep. Jean Canwin and I had made an appointment to check on Little Wong Lee tomorrow, so I had to rest early today. The next morning, I got up at around 6 o'clock a.m. After washing up, I hurried to Jean Canwin's room. Jean Canwin had gotten up earlier than me. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, casting a spell on Little Wong Lee in front of him. Little Wong Lee was lying motionless on the crib. His entire body was wrapped in a strong aura of the way. At this time, Jean Canwin was holding the Yin-Yang Yama brush in his hand. He was chanting mysterious spells and drawing some patterns on Little Wong Lee. I had seen Jean Canwin nurture Little Wong Lee's body before. It was the same every time, so I didn't find it strange. I directly walked in. Seeing me, Jean Canwin didn't move. He just signaled me with his eyes. His hands didn't stop moving as he continued to cast a spell on Little Wong Lee's body. The spell he used was very magical. He drew something on Little Wong Lee's body like he was writing. Then, messy lines appeared in the air, hovering above Little Wong Lee's body. They faintly flashed with colorful lights. "Little Wong Lee, be good. Master will cast a spell for you. It'll be done soon." While casting the spell, Jean Canwin took the time to comfort Little Wong Lee while chanting the spell. My heart warmed when I saw that. Although this fellow had mentioned killing Little Wong Lee many times, he was actually like a gentle father. Perhaps he cared about Little Wong Lee more than I did. After a full half an hour, when the messy lines emitting colorful brilliance all fell and melted into Little Wong Lee's body, the spell casting finally ended. Jean Canwin withdrew his hand, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and let out a long sigh of relief. "Brother Jean, how is it?" I hadn't said anything because I was afraid of disturbing Jean Canwin. Now, I finally dared to speak. "The situation isn't good." Jean Canwin shook his head with a wry smile. This spell was passed down by the ancestors of Mount One. I don't dare to say that it can heal the dead, but I've never seen a better effect in nurturing a person. Over the past few months, I've been using this method to nurture little Wang Li's body, hoping to dispel the evil aura coming from the pit so that little Wang Li's body can be stronger and hold on for a few more days. It might even be able to delay the arrival of the evil creature. Unfortunately, as you can see, I've been busy for a few months, but little Wang Li's condition hasn't improved at all. It seems that the situation is much more serious than I estimated. Listening to his words, my heart tightened. Jean Canwin was even more puzzled. After a moment of silence, he said with a wry smile, "It really doesn't make sense. That evil creature is still dormant and won't actively resist. How come it doesn't have any effect?" As Jean Canwin spoke, he shook his head, his voice tinged with bitterness. Could it be that I'm wrong? Every day, I exhaust my Tao energy, but it doesn't have any effect on that evil creature? Or is it because that evil creature's cultivation base is too strong, and my Tao energy isn't enough to affect it? At this moment, Jean Canwin was analyzing and muttering to himself as if no one else was around. However, his words reminded me of something. Last time, when the evil creature in little Wang Li's body temporarily descended, I was there and felt the evil creature's aura. Judging from the weak aura on Wang Li's body, the evil creature was indeed strong, but it wasn't strong enough that Jean Canwin couldn't shake it with his cultivation base. After all, the evil creature was still at the other end of the passage. What appeared on Wang Li's body was just a trace of its aura. With Jean Canwin's cultivation base, he should be able to deal with it easily. This was also the fundamental reason why Jean Canwin was confident that he could help little Wang Li get through the first two hurdles. What went wrong? Why didn't Jean Canwin's situation get better after working so hard for so many days? Instead, it got worse? I hesitated for a moment, and a vague idea popped up in my mind. There were only two types of sources that cultivators cultivated. One was the chi of the way, and the other was the chi of witchcraft. If Jean Canwin used his witchcraft energy to raise little Wang Li every day and there was no effect, could he try witchcraft energy? This wasn't an idea I came up with on the spur of the moment. Every power had a limit. Jean Canwin had been exhausting his own Tao energy every day for several months. When added together, the power of his Tao energy was terrifying. If there was still no effect, it could only be said that it wasn't that his Tao energy wasn't enough, but that his Tao energy was useless. In the world, there were only two kinds of sources. If Tao energy didn't work, then he could only try witchcraft energy. Brother Jean, do you think it will be useful if I use my witchcraft energy to raise little Wang Li? I asked after some consideration. Hearing my words, Jean Canwin was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted and blurted, "Yeah, why didn't I think of that? Maybe that evil creature's power is strange, and my Tao energy is useless against it. That's not right. If my Tao energy is useless against it, it might backfire and speed up its awakening. No wonder I felt that little Wang Li's condition didn't improve, but worsened. That must be it. Hurry up and try." As the saying goes, those closely involved can't see clearly. After I pointed out another possibility, Jean Canwin seemed to have gone crazy and muttered to himself. Then, he didn't bother to listen to my reply and pull me to sit on the bed. He asked me to try to use my shaman energy. Chapter 457. I grabbed little Wang Li's hand and silently urged the shaman energy in my body, slowly injecting it into little Wang Li's body. Jean Canwin didn't even dare to breathe heavily as he watched everything with a burning gaze. Little Wang Li's condition wasn't bad. He lay there, his black eyes looking at me with interest as his body turned from time to time. I silently mobilized the shaman energy in my body and slowly increased the amount of shaman energy in my hand. At the same time, a dark green light curtain hovered around little Wang Li's body. As more and more energy was injected, The light curtain became thicker and thicker. Although the evil creature hadn't awakened yet, its body would have an instinctive defense during its dormancy. This defense would instinctively respond to external energy. It felt like two pieces of magnets. If the two energies were of different origins, they would repel each other. As more energy was injected, the repulsive force would also increase until it interfered with the dormant evil being and urged it to awaken. If the two energies were of the same origin, they would respond to each other and nourish each other. It might even affect the dormant evil creature and prolong its dormancy. At the beginning, little Wang Li didn't show any discomfort and I didn't encounter much resistance. However, as more and more shaman energy was injected, little Wang Li suddenly became restless and his body began to move. At the same time, the resistance I felt slowly increased. As the shaman energy in my body was mobilized, the amount of shaman energy injected became extremely majestic. However, the evil creature became more and more resistant, and the resistance of the infusion of shaman energy also increased. Could it be that this evil creature didn't cultivate Dao Qi or shaman energy? This situation was unbelievable, but I didn't stop my hand movements. Instead, I slowly increased the speed of the shaman energy in my body. As the amount of wizard Qi that was injected increased, so did the resistance. Moreover, this resistance would increase exponentially as the wizard Qi continued to be injected. It felt as if two people were arm wrestling, and the more they wrestled, the harder it would be for them to do so. At that moment, my forehead was covered in sweat. It was as if I was competing with an opponent with a high cultivation base in terms of shaman energy. It consumed a lot of energy. Zhang Kanwen looked at everything in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. Forget it, Zhou Yi. If you can't do it, don't force yourself. Thinking that this might be the last way to help little Wang Li stabilize the evil creature, I felt a little dispirited. However, since things had come to this point, there was nothing I could do. Forcibly injecting the magic energy might even accelerate the evil creature's awakening. In the end, it would be counterproductive. So, I slowly slowed down the flow of magic energy in my hand, preparing to stop the process. Originally, as long as I can temporarily suppress this evil creature, I have a way to prevent this evil creature from awakening for half a year. Now, it seems that I can't do it, Zhang Kanwen said regretfully. At this time, the dark green light curtain around little Wang Li's body did not fade or fluctuate in the slightest. In other words, the sorcery aura was not absorbed or sensed by the evil being in little Wang Li's body. I lowered my head and pondered. This matter was getting more and more troublesome. No matter if it was Dao Qi or Shaman Qi, that evil creature was very resistant to both. Could it be that it cultivated another kind of origin? But in this world, there is only Dao Qi and Shaman Qi. Where else could there be other forms of energy? The energy between heaven and earth came from the 4 remaining stars and the 7 glorious stars. The 4 remaining stars corresponded to the Tai Sui's Shaman Qi, while the 7 glorious stars corresponded to the popular Dao Qi. Could it be that this evil creature could establish a connection with other constellations and cultivate another kind of energy? I stopped the transmission of the magic energy in my body and looked at the scene in front of me in a daze. I couldn't speak for a long time. I was already worried when I found out that this evil creature's cultivation base was extremely high. Now, this situation made me even more uncertain. If it didn't cultivate Dao Qi or Shaman Qi, then where did the evil creature in front of me absorb energy from? Zhang Kanwen put his hand through the light curtain and touched little Wang Li's head. It felt like a kind father comforting his seriously ill son. It made people's hearts ache. Sigh. No, we can only think of another way. Zhou, absorb this light curtain back. Since that evil creature can't absorb it, this energy will accelerate its awakening. Zhang Kanwen reminded me. I extended my hand and planned to do as he said. Just as Zhang Kanwen had said, since the evil creature couldn't absorb the magic energy, it would be counterproductive to leave it here. Both of us were very dispirited. Since we couldn't suppress the evil creature in little Wang Li's body, we had to be prepared for it to wake up at any time. However, just as I was about to retract the shaman energy, the light curtain hovering in front of little Wang Li fluctuated. It was as if a stone had been thrown into the calm surface of the water, causing ripples to appear. That evil creature sensed it. I couldn't help but say, the evil creature in little Wang Li's body was dormant. It was normal that it couldn't absorb the magic energy, but it could sense it. In other words, that evil creature was likely to cultivate magic energy. Jean Cameron obviously noticed the situation. He was ecstatic. This evil creature can sense magic energy. After working for a long time, I finally saw the light of victory. I couldn't help but smile. Big Brother Zhang, now that we know that this evil creature can sense magic energy, do you have a way to suppress it? Zhang Canwen was wild with joy earlier and had slightly lost his composure. He only stabilized his emotions after quite a while, then nodded and said with certainty, many of the spells left behind by our ancestors are used to deal with people who cultivate shaman energy. Now, since this evil creature can sense shaman energy, I should have a way to suppress it. I exhaled in relief. Thank you, Big Brother Zhang. Zhang Canwen and little Wang Li had been together for a long time, and they had a deep relationship. At this moment, I didn't need to say anything. He immediately started to cast a spell for little Wang Li. The dark green halo on little Wang Li's body was still there. Zhang Canwen took out the Yin-Yang Yama brush and drew some runes on the halo. In an instant, the layer of dark green brilliance fluctuated violently, like the surface of the sea that had been hit by a strong wind. Then, it slowly calmed down and finally turned into a light curtain that drilled into little Wang Li's body. Zhang Canwen stopped the spell and had a gratified expression on his face. I couldn't help but ask, Big Brother Zhang, are you done? Zhang Canwen turned over little Wang Li's body and pointed at the spot where the dark spot had been. He smiled and said, there should be no problem now. I believe it's enough to suppress this evil creature for half a year. I followed Zhang Canwen's line of sight. Indeed, the fist-sized crater had shrunk to the size of a kumquat. Previously, the crater had looked like a sinkhole, and I couldn't help but feel dizzy. But now it was much shallower. After Sister Toshiba possessed a human body, the closer she was to awakening, the larger and deeper the pit would become. When she broke out of the ground, the pit would become like a bottomless sinkhole, making people dizzy just by looking at it. But now, the area of the dark spot had shrunk a lot, and the depth of vision had become much shallower. It seemed that the evil creature had been suppressed. The current situation made my mood better. I exclaimed, Big Brother Zhang, you're really good. You've really restrained this evil creature. Unfortunately, I don't have mugwort on hand. If I had this thing, I could use a secret technique to delay the awakening of this evil creature for another year. Zhang Canwen sighed. Mugwort? Isn't this thing everywhere on the street? I was puzzled. Mugwort was a kind of wild herb. In addition, it had the effect of exorcising evil spirits. Almost every household in the countryside would hang it on the door of their house, especially in the countryside of Shenzhen. This thing was simply everywhere. Wasn't it easy to find mugwort? Zhang Canwen waved his hand. Of course, I'm not talking about ordinary mugwort. I'm talking about the best mugwort, the 7-star mugwort. Zhang Canwen explained. The 7-star mugwort has the most miraculous effect when used to exorcise evil spirits. Most spirits and ghosts would be afraid when they see the 7-star mugwort. Using this thing to make magic tools to catch and capture ghosts can yield twice the result with half the effort. Nowadays, many cultivators use magic tools made of mugwort. In the feudal era, this thing was given to the emperor as an auspicious sign. How could it be so easy to find? Then, Zhang Canwen waved his hand. Forget it. This thing is very rare. It's useless to say it. No matter what, the evil spirit in little Wang Li's body is finally suppressed. We can have at least half a year. I nodded. No matter what, that evil creature could live peacefully for at least half a year. At that time, perhaps the evil sacrificial spirit would come out of seclusion and help me get rid of the Miaojiang ancestral insect. This matter couldn't be rushed. Zhang Kanwen was a little tired after performing the spell twice in a row. I didn't disturb him anymore. I asked him to rest for a while before leaving his room. After being busy for a long time, we could finally suppress that evil creature. I felt a little relieved. I called Wang Yongjun and Wang Kuan to inform them of this good news. Of course, they were very grateful and excitedly expressed their gratitude. After I told them about the situation, I hung up the phone and went to sleep. After dealing with little Wang Li's matter, not only was Zhang Kanwen tired, but I was also very tired. I slept until the morning of the next day. Not long after I got up, I went to Zhang Kanwen's place to check on the situation. However, before I could go out, the phone in my pocket suddenly rang. I picked it up and saw that it was Dainan Zhou, whom I hadn't seen for a long time. I had heard from Wang Kuan that Dainan Zhou was now a project manager of Wang Yongjun's group. He was expanding his business in Hong Kong. He was busy all day and rarely went home. I hadn't seen him in Guangzhou this time. Why did he suddenly call me? Chapter 458. Dainan Zhou was anxious. His voice was trembling on the other end of the phone. Dainan Zhou had been following Wang Yongjun in the business world for many years. He wasn't a young boy anymore. He had become a smart businessman. According to Wang Yongjun, he was calm and experienced. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let him go to Hong Kong to expand his business. What made him so anxious that he lost his composure? I comforted him. Don't worry. Tell me slowly. What happened? Dainan Zhou gradually calmed down and told me the whole story. Last year, Wang Yongjun had appointed Dainan Zhou as the project manager of the Wang Group. He had to go to Hong Kong to expand his real estate business. Wang Yongjun had been doing a good job in the past few years. The Wang Group had grown stronger, and its various businesses had a market value of more than 10 billion renminbi. He had gradually sold several electronic factories, which gave him a lot of money. He had started to expand his business in real estate and other industries. The real estate industry in China was saturated, and the atmosphere in China wasn't good. It was hard for ordinary people to get involved. That was why he had decided to go to Hong Kong to develop his business. He wanted to get a share of the real estate business there. This time, the Wang Group didn't hesitate to invest a lot of money to cooperate with Hong Kong's real estate tycoon, Li Changhui, to develop a real estate in the bustling area of Causeway Bay. On one hand, it was because Dainan Zhou had the ability to work independently. On the other hand, Wang Yongjun wanted to train him, so he gave this important task to Dainan Zhou. It was a rare opportunity for him, so Dainan Zhou cherished it. He had been busy for a long time. Finally, in April, he had finished all the necessary procedures and was ready to start construction. But at this moment, strange things happened one after another. On the day of the construction, Dainan Zhou and Li Chenghui's representatives had just finished cutting the ribbon when a foreman accidentally fell from the excavator and broke his arm. It wasn't a good sign to have a problem when the excavation started. However, it was normal to have injuries and injuries on the construction site. It was impossible to stop such a big project. Dainan Zhou ordered the construction to continue. However, on the same day, 10 excavators broke down at the same time. Moreover, they all broke down at the same place where the construction site was supposed to start. After Dainan Zhou finished dealing with these matters, he thought that he could start work smoothly. However, when he woke up the next day, there were several corpses of the workers on the construction site. The corpses lay quietly on the ground, bleeding from all 7 orifices. Their faces were twisted and strange. Later, when the forensic doctor dissected the corpses, the cause of death was the same. All of them died of myocardial infarction. Someone had died on the construction site. Not only did the workers not dare to work there, even Dainan Zhou and Li Chenghui were anxious. This wasn't a case of a worker, but a few lives at once. Even though Li Chenghui was very resourceful, he still had to go through a lot of trouble to settle this matter. But then everything did not improve. When the matter was almost settled, officials of the Hong Kong Housing Department pointed out that there were illegal acts in the process of handling the real estate procedures on behalf of Nan Zhou and ordered the construction site to stop. Poor Dainan Zhou. He had already completed the procedures in April. 3 months had passed, but there was no progress on the project. Moreover, he had to go through a lot of lawsuits. Brother, please save me. Now, the group has invested several hundred million. Every day we waste here is another million. If this continues, the group will withdraw their investment. At that time, not only will the company suffer a great loss, but I'm afraid I won't have the face to go back. Dainan Zhou cried on the other end of the phone. This was the first time he had taken charge of a project alone. He didn't expect to encounter so many unexpected events. I frowned and thought for a while. Then I asked, "Did you call me specifically because you suspect that there's a problem with the geomancy?" "Yeah." Dainan Zhou's tone became heavier. He said hurriedly, "People died inexplicably, and something happened inexplicably. It must be related to the geomancy. That's why I called you. I want you to analyze it for me." His answer wasn't out of my expectations. However, I didn't understand a specific situation, so I couldn't analyze it. After thinking for a while, I said, "If it's a geomancy problem, it involves a lot of things. I can't explain it clearly, but generally speaking, this kind of problem is related to that piece of land. Have you ever thought of changing the location?" Dainan Zhou shouted, "Brother, are you joking? In Hong Kong, every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. Buying this piece of land has already used up most of our group's funds. We still have the bank loans. It's basically impossible to change the location. Moreover, we found a most famous geomancy master in Hong Kong to look at this place. There's no reason for there to be such a big problem with the geomancy." After he said that, I reacted. Their industry relied on the land to make a living. It was indeed impossible to change the location. After thinking for a while, I asked, "After the accident, didn't you find a geomancy master to look at it again?" There were many things to pay attention to in geomancy. There are many taboos in many places. Perhaps there wouldn't be any problems at the beginning. However, if you broke the ground and offended something, it would bring a series of disasters. I did. Hong Kong's geomancy is very strong, and there are many geomancy masters. However, Li Qinghui's representative found who knows how many local masters to look at it, but they couldn't find any clues. Now, the construction site still hasn't moved an inch. Even the foundation hasn't been built. Dainan Zhou continued, "I really don't have any other choice. Today, I contacted my uncle. He said that you returned to Guangzhou, so I quickly came to you. This time, you must help your brother come over and take a look. Otherwise, I won't be able to face anyone in the group. Originally, I relied on nepotism to climb up. Many people in the company don't accept me. If this matter is messed up again, I'm afraid that even my uncle won't be able to protect me." I pondered in silence for a while. If I went to Hong Kong, the evil spirit in little Wang Li's body had been suppressed. It wouldn't awaken in half a year. Moreover, I still had an old friend in Hong Kong. The hatred of the great elder of the ghost-raising sect, Jiang Tianxin, was still fresh in my mind. If I went to Hong Kong this time, I could meet him and solve that grudge. On the other hand, Hong Kong had a strong feng shui atmosphere. There were many spiritual items. I could also take the opportunity to help little Wang Li find the 7-star mugwort. Moreover, it wasn't easy for me to refuse. After all, I was a consultant hired by Wang Yongjun. Wang Yongjun still had to pay me a few million a year. In these years, it wasn't right for me to just take the money and not do anything. After thinking for a while, I made a decision. Okay, I'll go to Hong Kong now. After making the decision, I went to Wang Kuen's room. At this time, Wang Kuen and his wife weren't the only ones in the room. Wang Yongjun was also here. The whole family was enjoying a family reunion. Wang Yongjun supported little Wang Li and rode on Wang Kuen's neck. The whole family couldn't stop smiling. They were indescribably happy. When Wang Yongjun saw me, he immediately smiled and said, "Mr. Zhou, you came at the right time. Wang Li is much better than before. Our family wanted to thank you, but seeing that you woke up late today, we didn't dare to disturb you." In the past, although Wang Yongjun was very respectful to me, he didn't use honorifics because of his age. But now, he even used you. which made me feel awkward. I smiled and nodded at him. Uncle Wong, don't worry. This is what I should do. Let's not talk about this first. When I came over, I received a call from Dai Nanzhou. Wang Yongjun was a smart man. When he heard the words Dai Nanzhou, he roughly knew what was going on. Wang Yongjun handed the child to Wang Kuen's wife and said apologetically, I specially instructed this Dai Nanzhou not to trouble you for the time being regarding the matter in Hong Kong. Who knew that he would agree to it in person? But he forgot about it and came to look for you so quickly. In the past few days, Wang Yongjun and Wang Kuen had been under a lot of pressure because of little Wang Li's matter, so they didn't manage the company's affairs much. However, as the chairman of Wang Group, he naturally knew about this matter. I wave my hand. It's okay. Now that the evil in little Wang Li's body has been suppressed, it won't be a problem for him to be safe for half a year. It just so happens I want to go to Hong Kong to find the 7-star mugwort. This thing is very helpful in suppressing the evil in little Wang Li's body. Moreover, going to Hong Kong also involves a personal grudge of mine. Sooner or later, I will go there. Then, I really have to trouble Mr. Zhou. Wang Yongjun said apologetically, and then said with a smile, capable people do more work. The matter in Hong Kong is indeed very important. If someone else could solve it, I wouldn't trouble Mr. Zhou no matter what. How about this? You don't have to leave in a hurry. Take a good rest. It won't be too late to go there when you are free in a few days. At that time, I will ask Wang Kunzai to go over. Wang Yongjun said apologetically, but he didn't decline in the end. I didn't think that he was hypocritical. After all, he was a businessman. Coming to find me on behalf of Nanzhou most likely had his tacit consent. If this matter wasn't resolved after a long time, Wang Yongjun would probably come to me personally. It involved the company's assets of nearly 1 billion. During this period of time, Wang Yongjun was just too busy with little Wang Li's matter to take care of himself. I smiled and shook my head. There's no need to rest. This matter can't be delayed. I'll leave today. It's not easy for Nanzhou to be alone there. Speaking of which, I'm also an employee of our group. I still have to contribute when it's time. Wang Yongjun declined again, but it was just some polite words. After some pleasantries, he agreed to let me leave immediately. After a simple packing, Wang Yongjun ordered Wang Kuen to drive his car over and prepare to send me to Hong Kong. However, looking at Wang Kuen's reluctant expression, I couldn't bear it and shook my head at him. You don't have to send me personally. I'll go by myself this time. It's rare for little Wang Li's condition to improve. Brother Wang, you should stay at home and accompany your son. At first, Wang Kuen didn't agree. He said that he didn't know how to thank me after I helped him so much. The only thing he could do was to drive me. I had to let him do such a small thing. However, I called Wang Yongjun to persuade him. In the end, Wang Yongjun found another driver from the company and gave me a check. I took a rough look at the amount. It was a total of 5 million. It was natural to receive payment, so I didn't refuse. I took the check and set off with the driver to Hong Kong. Hong Kong was very close to Shenzhen. It only took a little more than an hour. However, I needed to apply for a Hong Kong and Macau pass to enter Hong Kong, and I needed to wait for the approval of the relevant departments. These trivial matters weren't a problem for Wang Yongjun, who had eyes and ears everywhere. Soon, I got a special pass and asked the driver to take me directly to Hong Kong. To drive a car from the mainland to Hong Kong, you needed to apply for 2 license plates and a driver's license for both places. However, Wang Yongjun had frequent business dealings with Hong Kong, so the driver often went there. It didn't take long before we arrived at Hong Kong's Hung Hom. As soon as I got out of the car, Dai Nanzhou was already there to greet me. There was also a young man standing next to him. I guess he was a secretary or a driver. When Dai Nanzhou saw me, he welcomed me as if I was his savior. He gave me a big hug. Brother Zhou, you're finally here. If you didn't come, I wouldn't have been able to hold on any longer. It seemed that Dai Nanzhou's life hadn't been good recently. He was just a young man in his 20s, but he looked tired. I could faintly see a lot of white hair on his head. After so many years of brotherhood, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Moreover, I glanced at Dai Nanzhou's face. The life palace between his eyebrows was a little dark red. It was true that things hadn't been going well recently. According to the life book, people with this kind of face were prone to disasters. Their fates weren't smooth, and from time to time, strange disasters would occur. I had read Dainanjo's face before, but I didn't see this. However, it wasn't strange. Luck was half predestined, and the other half depended on one's experience. People with great fortune might gradually lose their fortune due to certain things in life and become unlucky people. People with bad fortune could use external forces and their own good deeds to gradually increase their fortune. These things weren't rare. I had to go to the building to find out the details. This is my assistant and driver. He's also my right-hand man, Wu Dunka. After hugging him, Dainanjo introduced the young man next to him to me. After I shook hands with Wu Dunka, Dainanjo didn't exchange pleasantries. He directly asked Wu Dunka to drive me to the construction site. Soon, we arrived at the building in Hong Kong's Causeway Bay. All the workers at the construction site had left. At this moment, only an old man was guarding the gate. When he saw us, he came to greet us. Dainanjo was very worried, so he didn't have the mood to care about the old man. After sending him away, he looked at me with bright eyes. "Brother Zhou, how is it? Can you see anything strange about the geomancy of this place?" I didn't talk nonsense and walked around the building to check. When building a house, the geomancy was very important. A good geomancy could make everything go smoothly. However, if the geomancy wasn't good, or if the house ended up in a place for raising corpses, disasters would come one after another. I couldn't afford to be careless. While I was checking, I used the flipping trigram palm to calculate. Normally, when checking geomancy, it was better to use the Luo Sutra. However, ever since the Luo Sutra broke, I hadn't carried a Luo Sutra with me for many years. However, with my current cultivation base, the effect of using the flipping trigram palm wasn't much worse than using the Luo Sutra. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.